roll it. Oh, yeah, I'm down now. Yeah.
You're all set, Brian? Brian, you're all set? Okay.
Who's the host tonight?
Alan is in place of Dylan. Dylan's on a little short.
Yeah, I saw Dylan tonight.
That actually depends on where the case is, because it depends on the population in the town that drives it. It really, none of this is perfect science. Yeah, but they compensate.
And I'm Ashley Zimmerman.
You take the number of cases, you multiply it by the population, and then you divide it by something like that. So it's taking the actual population. Oh, it is. Yeah.
That's how they adjust it. Similar
Yeah.
percentages, you're similar county to county to county, because they base it on, they divide it based on 100,000. Some places have more than 100,000, so their number will go down theoretically.
Does Julie need to be back?
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
What? Once I pull this up, is it that? Or is it that? Heck of a day.
John, look at how your name is spelled.
Oh my. Thanks.
It's Juon.
Juan.
One.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And John, I'll be monitoring the school board at DPSD throughout the meeting.
Good. Yeah, so get some questions, we'll answer them. Are we ready, John?
Corey, DVSD school board, what about DVS? Isn't that what we're sending now? Or-
No, the
No.
meetings always switch.
Yeah, for the meetings at the school board at DVSD,
Because I know parents did contact me today, and they're all sending them to Ask Stevie.
which is what they
We'll
should be
announce
doing
it differently.
generally.
That's
School
part of
board
the-
during the school board meeting, so that
They
we
didn't
can
think
monitor
that's
them.
not right off the bat.
So they want to ask questions tonight.
So the school board at DVSD. And
You
John
gotta
will
say
make
that.
quick
Well,
School
announcement.
board.
John's
They're
gonna
all gonna
announce
send
that now, or
Okay.
Jack's gonna announce
We'll
that
get
now, and then Corey can announce it at the beginning of the regular board meeting as well.
Are we up? We ready?
John says your meeting should start in a few seconds.
Okay. Okay, so let's, we'll welcome everyone to the reopening committee meeting, which is starting at 6:44 due to an executive session. We have on the agenda 7 items. However, we are omitting the first one, DV Cyber Academy with Dr. Brian Blum. We're going to do that next week, Brian, wherever Brian went. And we're going to start tonight by letting everyone know that if you want to contact us, you will send an email to schoolboard@dvsd.org, not ask DV. We're now supplementing it direct to the school board. So schoolboard@dvsd.org. Send us your questions. Mr. Homer is monitoring that, and so is Dr. Bell, I believe. And we will answer any questions you might have regarding any of the issues with reopening. So as we get started, we're going to start with Chris Lordy. Are you there, Chris?
Yes, I am.
Oh, I see Chris. Okay.
Can you hear me?
So, Chris, we're passing it off to you.
Okay. In your handouts, you will see the first chart that I'm going to discuss. It says recommendations for pre-K to 12 schools in determining instructional models. This is guidance from the White House Coronavirus Task Force as well as the state of Pennsylvania. This is a chart that we follow on a weekly basis. The Department of Education does publish this list on Fridays, and basically it tracks the transmission level for the counties. Low, moderate, and substantial are the three different categories. Low is less than 10, moderate is 10 to less than 100, substantial is greater than 100. Based on those numbers, they do recommend an instructional model. When we started the year, we were currently in low, where we had less than 10 cases in the county. As of 9/11, the week ending 9/11, the county did move to the moderate level. As part of that, though, the state recommends that you do wait and make your decision based on a 14-day cycle. So we're currently only on a 7-day cycle in the moderate. So we have this week as well to go. Now, part of the moderate recommendation instructional model is blended learning or full remote. The low, which we were in when we started the year, was full or blended. But as you can see, we still have a week to go. That is important. If you look at the next handout, it's labeled COVID-19 at the top. In that, it tells you based on the transmission level of the county, then it tells you what we should do with positive cases within those 14-day period. So since we're a moderate, you can see that if you have a positive case, one staff, one student, two students, staff in the same building, less than 5% or multiple buildings. Okay, so we're currently in the number 2 cases in a 14-day period in multiple buildings. So we're currently right now teetering on that edge for what the Department of Health recommends within their guidance. As you know, when there are positive cases that happen, we work directly with the Pennsylvania Department of Health, which we've been doing all day. And then they also provide us with another avenue through our IU department called the Rapid Response Center, where we can work directly with the Department of Health to find out any issues or walk us through any questions we may have in deciphering what we need to do as a district. And everybody has been top-notch in dealing with us and getting back to us on our timely basis throughout today.
And Chris, just so I understand, we are 10 per 100,000. We don't have a county that has 100,000 in it. So they're prorating that to our size county, which is what, 50,000 or 60,000?
Correct. 50,000. Correct.
Say it again.
We're about 50,000.
So it would be 5 for us. Okay, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Lordy from the board first? I'll look around. Felicia has a question for you.
Sure, I just have at the bottom of where it's, the low, the moderate, and the substantial, it says underneath it, if fewer than 10 cases are reported in a most recent day period, that we would automatically qualify as low level.
Correct. Yes. So that is, if this week coming up, week ending 9/18, if we have less, then the county will go back to low.
Okay. Thank you.
And that's why they recommend you waiting on a 14-day cycle, just because it ebbs and flows on a daily basis. So they feel that same way on a weekly basis. You can't make a decision on 7 days of data.
Anybody else who would like to ask Chris a question?
Yeah, Chris, do we know what the case count was last week?
Jack, you unmuted? Yeah. Just a minute, Chris.
Sorry, Chris. Do we know what the cases were last week? The numbers in Pike County? Do you have those numbers on this week?
I do not have those numbers for,
Last week.
for
well, I
last
can
week.
do that. Last week, we were 10 cases, 5 over the prior week. The prior week, we were 5. Week before that, we were 7.
The week before that, we were 7. And Dawn, who's reporting those cases? Who are you getting those numbers from?
Coming from the state.
That's from the state?
Thank you, Don.
On their, when they give out their Friday report on the, sorry, on the model,
Right.
it'll just give you, like, for instance, this last week, it had a +5. That's telling you that it's 5 more than the prior week. So you have to either go back to their archived information or be following it to know what that +5 means.
I got you. All
Were
right.
any of those pieces redacted from the 10 from last week?
That I don't know yet. Okay. That I don't know, but I will tell you on last, on this numbers that came out for the 16th, there were 6 cases in our district, 10 cases in our county.
Okay.
For example, there were 2 in Greentown, Lackawaxen, Bushkill. So they're not even in our community, but they're in our county.
All right. All right, so we have to go another 7 days at moderate before we would have to do something. Am I correct, Chris?
Yes, and they're only recommendations.
Their recommendations, not requirements.
Correct.
Okay.
Would we like to put on our DV site a website that ties into Dawn's numbers? Or John, are you keeping track? Peg keeping track? Chris? Look.
We can do a link to the state site on our reopening information, that giant plethora of info, we could put it at the top.
The state comes out with the dashboard every Friday that gives you the weekly numbers, and then PDE comes out with their own, but they're like on a week lag. I don't know why. And they'll actually say whether you're low, like here, we've been low all the way as long as they've been tracking it, except last week we were moderate. So,
And you
but
can
yes,
see exactly.
Okay, so let's put
are.
the one that has the update information,
Sure.
not the PDE.
Yep.
Let's put that on our website.
And Dawn, thank you.
Yeah.
I know you have to- Oh, yeah.
Okay, so we're going to move on now. Thank you, Chris.
Jack, okay, I just unmuted, but I wanted to thank Dawn. I know that she has been spending hours and hours collecting this information and following these numbers, and kudos to you. You're the one here who has the information.
Thanks for the kudos, but I made a mistake. I want to correct my
Okay.
error. I was reading from the wrong chart. For last week's numbers for 9/11, out of the 10 in the county, there were 2 in our district. And there was 1 in Hawley, 1 Bushkill, 1 Lackawaxen, 2 Greeley, and 3 Greentown. So even though we had cases that would put us, into moderate, our district didn't have the cases. So, and I think, Jack, that's why it's guidance, because if you really drill down and look at it, we may find that we have an outbreak in our school that isn't in the county, that we have to adjust differently. So that's why yeah.
So thank you, Chris Laurie, for all your information. Are these pages on the website for people to
Yes,
look
they
at?
are. Mhm.
You have them, Tim? Okay.
And the other thing I want to mention, the next page in your folder are just minor changes to the health and safety plan, some corrections, fixing some redundancies, example. And Chris had worked on this, just cleaning it up and making sure that one section cooperates with the other section, because we had multiple people working on this document, just little things that we found. So that's just what it says, Delaware Valley Health and Safety Plan updates as of September 17th. Add a word here, take something out there. It's all minor stuff, but I wanted to make you aware of what it was.
That's what we'll be voting on tonight.
Right. These are the only changes to that big fat 42-page document. It's just these little things on the front page so you didn't have to go through a wall and drive yourself nuts.
So John, with 6 minutes to go and with delaying things till next week, pick out the best of the items 3, 4, 5, and 6 that you'd like to touch on in the next 5 minutes. I don't want this to drag into the regular meeting.
Okay,
And we
yes,
can just roll it over to next week.
on number 4, it's just information we wanted to share with you about health office, the nurse's office procedures. And you can read that for yourselves. We don't need to have a presentation on it. And then every fall, then moving to number 5, every fall, I always give you a professional staffing chart and a classified staffing chart of who left after last year and who's new for this year. So they're in here just to give you an idea of like, okay, who took over for that person that retired. It's nice to have that as like a little reference sheet. But something that's totally new this year is the list of all the people on leaves for the various different kinds of leaves that we have going on. So there's actually 3 sheets instead of the normal 2 because of the situation we're in. And then in number 6, is just the updated attendance by grade and building, which you normally see. We've just expanded it a little bit to give you a better idea. So our total attendance, not counting homeschoolers and outside cyber, is 4,363. When you add in your homeschoolers and your outside cybers, it takes us up to 4,601. So you get these every month, but this one just gives you a little more info. And you can see the changes because DV Cyber has grown this year. Normally we'd have somewhere in the vicinity of 100. We have 286, so that's a big difference. The numbers up above are in-person and Zoomers.
I was just gonna say, so
They're combined. The Zooming is about 25%, just to give you a ballpark figure.
So it's still around 1,000.
Yeah.
And the one item on leave is confidential. Please don't share that with anyone. That shouldn't be on the website. So if you're looking at that, just note that it is confidential. We don't give that information out to the public. All right.
We made it.
So are there any questions?
I have 3 from the public.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. The first one is if there's a threshold, and this might be for Chris or John, is there a threshold where the recommendation turns into a requirement where the school has to change modalities if we hit a certain infection rate within the school district?
Yes. And if you look at that, the COVID-19, and it talks about the number of cases within that 14-day period, it does turn from a recommendation to a requirement that the school is closed with 5+ positives from staff and students in the same building, or 2 to 4 cases, not the same household, in multiple buildings, or greater than 5% of your total student staff population.
Great, thanks, Chris.
And closure doesn't mean. Underneath it is the 5 to 7 days. And I think that's.
Chris, is this information that's sitting here in front of me, these sheets right here? Are they available on the website?
Yes, they are.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
The second
Welcome.
comment, and this is probably for Dr. Bell and Peg, is how quickly can we transition from in-person to Zoom if we need to?
Well, last year we did it in a day, I think. The one issue that we'll have is we've done Chromebook distribution to all the secondary students who have returned their form. Now we're going to start working on Chromebook distribution for grades 3, 4, and 5. We decided to hold off on giving the little guys a Chromebook because the idea of having K2 lugging a Chromebook back and forth every day, we decided that if we need to transition in a hurry, we could simply do a Chromebook distribution at the 3 schools that have K2 classes and just have a night like we've done before. That way there's not the wear and tear and the weight of the little guys having to have a Chromebook tugging it to and from school every day. So we could be ready. I mean, if we had to shut down, if something happened and we're in a really bad place,
and we had to shut down, we'd probably need a day. We'd probably announce that there'd be no school tomorrow, but there'll be Chromebook distributions tomorrow night, that kind of thing, and then be ready for the next day. So you'd burn one snow day perhaps, and so we can do it pretty quickly the second time around. So.
All right, and then the third is just a comment that since we're close to the recommendation for a different style of learning, we should consider being proactive and change to either a hybrid or remote, or consider that possibility for the future. And that was just a comment from the public. So, and that's it.
Okay, meeting adjourned. That quick.
All right, will everybody please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you, everyone. And now, Julie, could you call the roll, please?
Here.
Here?
He said yeah.
Here.
Here.
There.
Here.
Here.
Excellent. Now, may I have a volunteer to read the mission statement?
I will. Delaware Valley School District, in partnership with our community, stands committed to maximizing student potential, fostering lifelong learning, and promoting responsible citizenship.
Thanks, Jess. Now I want to thank the public for streaming in through the YouTube, through the district's website, through our YouTube channel. If you have any questions throughout the meeting, they'll be addressed at the end of the meeting under other business, unless they're pertinent to the topic at the time. And they should be sent to schoolboard@dvsd.org. Again, that's schoolboard@dvsd.org. And now may I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
Motion.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing no objections, the motion carries. There are no presentations this evening. May I have a motion to approve the minutes from the regular board meeting held on August 27th, 2020?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say, or sorry, is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing no objections, the motion carries. There are no reports except for the financial reports this evening. Are there any comments on the financial reports?
I just wanted to thank Bill Hessling for answering all my questions, so we didn't have to use time here at the meeting for them. So thank you, Bill. I appreciate you getting back so quickly.
Thanks, Jack. Now to the superintendent's report. Dr. Bell.
Thank you, Corey. We're in week 3. We're moving along nicely until we hit a speed bump today. For those people who are not up to speed, there were 2 positive people, tested positive people, one from Delaware Valley High School and one from Delaware Valley Middle School. They're now quarantined, as are anybody in their immediate family that lives in their home. And then we had to make calls today. So hats off to our administrators who went in, they kicked it into high gear and did a great job this afternoon, getting down to brass tacks to find out everybody who was involved, everybody who might have been considered a direct contact, which is somebody who is within 6 feet for 15 minutes or more. And all totaled, there's about 12 people at DV Middle School and about 18 people in the high school who also have to be quarantined. So roughly 30 people, but that's pretty good considering that it could have been a lot more, because you never know what the size of the classes are, where someone sits in a class can determine who's inside their 6-foot bubble. So, it's our first experience with people testing positive, and I appreciate everybody in the staff who were working sometimes with not a lot of information, because you can't share a lot of information. We had to gather a lot of info about seating charts in classes, seating charts in buses, who's within 6 feet, and all these different things without really divulging too much of what's going on because of all the HIPAA rules that we must follow. So I just wanted to thank everybody. I'm sorry the community is going through a little bit of stress, but this is just part of the nature of what we're living with in America right now. And I thought our staff did a heck of a job getting on this right away today and identifying everybody who needed to be identified, communicating with their families and getting them taken care of. And then we'll just continue to press on. And that's all I have.
Are there any questions for John? Dr. Bell?
Well, I did have a question, John. Perhaps you'd like to address the issue of parents who know that they are, someone in their family is testing positive, that we expect that they have a responsibility to us to notify us that somebody in their family tested positive.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's some people get tested and they wait forever for tests to come back. Other people are going to places where they can get a much more rapid test and get their results faster. But obviously, if you have someone in your family who tests positive, either we need to know about it or you need to keep everybody home ASAP for the next 14 days. If you're not comfortable telling us, and the kids are not showing any symptoms, they cannot come to school. We've got to be sure, when in doubt, to keep kids home. We'd love if you just whisper a little something to the school nurse or the counselor or somebody that you're close to, so that we know. Certainly, you're required to tell us if an employee or a staff member or a student rather tests positive. You're required to tell us. But if it's somebody else in your family, just don't send kids to school until we know. Play it safe. We're relaxing the attendance rules this year. It's like no year before. We're going to be real relaxed on attendance and absence letters and things of that nature. When in doubt, keep kids home. And a day, sometimes things are a lot clearer after another day or two. And so I'm asking everybody, when in doubt, keep them home. Okay.
John, could you just give me those numbers again? I know it's 30 in total. Could you give me the numbers for the quarantine?
Yeah, it's about 12 in the middle school, 18 in the high school.
18 in the high school. Okay. So.
And that's a combination of students and staff.
And how do we determine who quarantines?
We use, there's a couple different things. The first thing you do is the definition of a close contact is someone who was within 6 feet of the positive person for 15 consecutive minutes or more. And then there's a couple other stipulations that we had to go through too. That's why we have the seating charts in the classroom, and we know who they sit with at lunch, and the seating charts in the buses too. So we had to pour through all those. Once we found out somebody was positive, we had to then pour through all those seating charts to find out who was inside that bubble and go from there.
Okay, that's what I'm concerned about, the cafeteria, when the masks come off in the cafeteria. I mean, I'm concerned enough about within the classroom with the masks on, but I'm really concerned about the cafeteria with the masks off. How do we determine who that person was in contact with?
Well, the
cafeteria when the masks were off.
The difference between the cafeteria and the classroom is in the classroom, there's no guarantee that they're 6 feet apart.
Right.
In the cafeteria, because they're taking their mask off to eat lunch, everyone is seated 6 feet apart so that we keep the social distancing. We don't guarantee it in the classroom when the masks are on, but we do in the cafeteria where they would take their mask off.
Right. And those students don't say it's a student or it's his teacher or a staff member or whoever it may be. That person doesn't take the mask off until they're seated at the cafeteria.
Right. Much like in a restaurant, you walk in with your mask on, and then once you're seated, you can take your mask off at your table. And then if you get up to go to the bathroom or pay the bill, you put your mask back on. We've also told the kids too, because it's pretty sad to see them sitting so far away from each other in the cafeteria. To see these little guys like in kindergarten and first grade at these big tables by themselves. So we've said also, when you're done eating, you can put your mask back on and move closer and socialize with someone else with their mask on, but never when you have your mask off. So now they don't have to spend the whole 30 minutes with their mask off all by themselves. Once they're done, because it never takes a kid 30 minutes to eat, they could put their mask back on, and then they can slide a little closer to talk to each other, no differently than they do in the classroom.
All right. And the persons who tested positive, we have no idea how long they were contagious before their test came in, or how many days they were around other people. We have no idea of that, do we?
Right. I mean, they didn't even go for the test and test positive until after they had been out of school a few days. They had been out for a few days prior to any of the testing happening or us finding out today at midday. So.
Okay.
Don, I
Thank you.
just have a comment from the public on the question. And was the notification based on 6 feet for over 15 minutes or under 6 feet for over 15 minutes? What was that?
For the parents that got the call,
Yeah.
the personal call?
Yep.
Yeah, the original barometer of a close contact is someone who's within 6 feet for 15 minutes or more. Something the State Department of Health kind of dumped on us this afternoon was, and this didn't apply in the high school, but it did apply in the middle school, that in that middle school setting, even though the kids were 6 feet apart, if they had taken any mass breaks on Monday when the student in the middle school was here, if they did take a mass break, everybody in that room is now considered a close contact, staff and students alike.
Thanks, John.
What are we doing with that classroom? What are we doing with these classrooms? Those kids are now Zoomers?
They're all part of yes, they're all part of that number, and they can Zoom for the next 2 weeks.
And the educator? Was any educators in contact with them?
I'd rather not answer that in public. It was the combination of people.
Right, okay. So everybody that was in close contact is quarantined. Okay.
All right, excellent. All right, if there's no other questions for Dr. Bell, we'll move on to the treasurer's report. May I have a motion to accept the treasurer's report?
Move.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing no objections, the motion carries. May I have a motion to accept the bills for payment, which include the general fund, cafeteria fund, and capital reserve fund?
Second.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing no objections, the motion carries. Moving on to personnel items. May I have a motion to approve the personnel items, including resignations, appointments, change of status, change of salary, uncompensated leave, and request for FFCRA leaves with the retirements accepted with regret? Is there any discussion on the personnel items? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing no objections, the motion carries. We'll move on to the items for approval. May I have a motion to approve the expulsion of student 2020-2021 4000261 for 180 school days?
So moved.
Is there any discussion? No
No
discussion.
discussions.
Thank you, Ashley.
She
All
gave you
those
the
in
look.
favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I get the look.
Hearing no objections, the motion carries. Once you get into that mode. All right. May I have a motion for the approval of Caitlin Castillo to work with Vivian Bruno to complete her social work internship with Marywood University from September 18th, 2020 through May 8th, 2021.
So moved.
Is there any discussion? All those in, oops, sorry, go ahead, Jess.
So, and I guess this ties into item D. So we have two different people that are going to be working with Vivian Bruno?
Correct.
So how does, I mean, I guess, not that I want to discourage people from working with our social workers, because, and I know that Vivian Bruno is phenomenal. But, you know, I mean, she is doing groups and stuff like that with kids and working with kids. So, I mean, having 3 adults in the room, we don't have another social worker that potentially the second student could work with? Maybe I'm overthinking this, but I mean, if, as a social worker, you're working with a student, do you know what I mean, to help counsel them and provide services, and I guess.
We don't use their small offices for groups. You know, we use larger places like conference rooms and classrooms. So one more person in the room isn't going to be problematic from a standpoint of the crowd.
I wasn't more, I'm not talking about the coronavirus aside. I'm talking about a student who goes in to see Mrs. Bruno now has 3 adults sitting in front of them when they go in to talk to her. So will we be cognizant of the fact that perhaps they may need to like, do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I just think that may be intimidating for a student who wants to go and talk to Mrs. Bruno about an issue when there's now, you know, having one person in with her, I think is one thing, but now you've got a student who may be upset about something that's going on at home, who now has to tell 3 adults.
Yeah, I honestly don't know the specifics of what the makeup is of the day for the 2 interns.
Okay.
I can't imagine Vivian would say yes if it was overwhelming.
I just, maybe we can reach out and just make sure.
I would ask that you approve it and then.
Yeah,
but we'll
and I'm not
follow
saying
up.
not to, but just
I'll talk to
something to
Vivian
think
tomorrow.
about and maybe have it, just
Sure.
talk with Vivian and just make sure that, you know, that we're cognizant of that.
Yeah.
When students do
Yeah.
come with sensitive information.
She's a
to-
dynamo, so I'm sure she's figured it all out.
She is, and that's why
I
I would never want to deprive somebody of working with her.
Right.
So
She's a
I'm
great
not
influence.
saying that I'm going to vote no. It's something to follow up on and just make sure that kids are comfortable.
And I don't even
speaking
know
with
if
her.
they're, how many hours they work, if they're staggered or
Right,
whatever.
and those are all things that they can,
Yeah.
obviously, I'm sure that you'll follow up on that for us. Thank you.
Does she only work at the secondary level or does she do anything at the elementary level? Oh, just the 2 middle schools, not even the high school? Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Is there any other discussion? All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Hearing no objections, the motion carries. May I have a motion for the approval of Erica Thomas to work with Amy DeVries to complete her speech language pathologist internship with Marywood University from September 18th, 2020 through December 18th, 2020. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Hearing no objections, the motion carries. May I have a motion for the approval of Kaylee McCooey to work with Vivian Bruno to complete her social work internship with Marywood University from September 18th, 2020 through May 8th, 2021.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing no objections, the motion carries. And may I have the motion for the approval of tenure for Megan Baccio?
So moved.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Congratulations, Megan.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I can't figure out how to get back to them on the agenda. On the bottom.
I just got clarification from Dr. Bixby that the two internships, one is at one building and one is at the other. So they won't be overlapping.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Yep.
And they don't work alone.
With Vivian, but Vivian splits her time between the two schools. So there'll be, one will be at the Dingman Delaware Middle School, the other will be at Delaware Valley Middle School.
Thanks. May I have a motion for the approval of David Hine as, oh, did we not finish?
You didn't say.
Jack beat me with his congratulations. Got me.
Distracted
Hearing no objections, the motion carries. And now congratulations to Mr. Fisher and the rest of the board. May I have a motion for the approval of David Hine as the Delaware Valley School District's vote for the 2021 Pennsylvania School Boards Association President-elect? Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing no objections, the motion carries. May I have a motion for the approval of Sabrina Backer or Danielle O'Keefe as the Delaware Valley School District's vote for the vice president position? Yeah, or is there one that anybody favored?
I agree with Sabrina.
Okay, excellent.
I'm sorry.
I made a motion for Sabrina.
Second.
Everybody okay with that? Yeah. All right, excellent. So there's a motion second on the table. Is there any other discussion on Sabrina Backer as the Pennsylvania School Boards Association Vice President? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing no objections, the motion carries. May I have a motion for this Delaware Valley School District's vote for Michael Gossert for a 3-year term, 2020-2023 as the Pennsylvania School Board Association Treasurer? Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing no objections, the motion carries. May I have a motion for the approval of Delaware Valley School District's vote for Brian Patula as the 2021 Pennsylvania School Board Association Sector 4 Advisor? Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing no objections, the motion carries. May I have a motion for the approval of Delaware Valley School District's vote for the 2 open trustee positions on the Pennsylvania School Board Association's Insurance Trust Board as listed? Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing no objections, the motion carries. May I have a motion for the approval of Delaware Valley School District's vote for the 2 open trustee positions on the School Board Secretaries Forum Steering Committee as listed below? Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing no objections, the motion carries. May I have a motion for the approval of the updated Delaware Valley Health and Safety Plan as per the attachment and as per was discussed in the reopening committee earlier? Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Hearing no objections, the motion carries. May I have a motion for the approval of the updated athletic health and safety plan as per the attachment? Is there any discussion? Oh, Brian. Yes, sir, Brian.
No, I don't.
Oh, you don't? Okay, sorry.
Hi, Brian.
I saw the unmute.
Thanks for asking.
All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing no objections, the motion carries. May I have a motion for the dismissal of classified employee 2020-2021 03283 effective September 17th, 2020? No discussion. It's a personnel item. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye, nay. I'm opposed.
Okay. Hearing one objections, the motion carries. May I have a motion for the approval of board policies listed 1 through 21 below? Second. Oh, sorry. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion?
I'd like to.
Yep.
Go ahead. The policy, the Zooming, the live streaming policy.
Yep.
I know we discussed, am I muted?
Uh,
Yep, I definitely am. The live streaming, policy that we discussed at the last, at the work session, I guess. So John, I know you said that you would have some more information as to why it's not changed, because I still strongly feel that, I know we're letting up on our attendance policy. But I do think that those students who are in-person students, if they are, let's say they get strep throat and are home for 3 days and are well enough to Zoom into the classroom, which is already being offered, I do think that if they're keeping up with the work and they're participating in class, then that should be marked as present, as it is for our students who are Zooming.
Yeah, I'm gonna have Brian talk about it a little bit because there were things that I didn't think of. Being a middle school guy and not a high school guy, I didn't even think of some of the negative connotations of letting them slip in for a day or two. If it's longer, that's a different story, but I'll let Brian talk about it.
Yeah, and I think it's just 2 different ways of looking at attendance. We view attendance at the secondary level as tracking and accountability. So if a student is classified as a brick and mortar student and they are, for example, absent first period, that is tracked throughout the day to the rest of their teachers. So if they are a brick and mortar student who's well enough to attend classes, and you have some teachers marking them present during the day and some teachers marking them absent excused, that creates an accountability problem for us, because we don't know if that student is home Zooming or if they left campus to go do something. So in order to keep track of the students, we just need to know where their physical location is. So what we are doing, we would like to do right now is be able to mark them absent excused, because there's nothing punitive about it. It's just telling the classroom teachers, as well as the attendance secretaries, the nurses, the guidance counselors, and then the administrators, that that student isn't physically present in the building. But if they show up on Zoom like they hopefully would be able to, the teacher would still personally track that attendance themselves to know that they were present for the class that day. Today is a great example where if we had students that we weren't able to keep track of and we didn't know when and if they were in the building or in particular classes, that would have made the process a lot harder in terms of things like contact tracing. So we look at it as an accountability tool for us to know where our students are. So from a safety perspective, if we have them being marked present for some periods because they're Zooming, and then maybe the next period they're not well and they're marked absent, we don't know administratively if that student was ever physically in the building. And with our volume, that becomes unmanageable. So again, that's the other reason why we don't want anything punitive to do with attendance. And if a student is absent excused, it doesn't have any negative connotation on the student. And I talked to Mrs. McNeely about it. We're going to look to see if there are additional attendance codes that we could add to Power School to better designate where students would be. So that's why we threw that caveat into the policy of unless otherwise directed by the building administrator or the building principal, I believe. So we wanted to explore those options while at the same time recognizing that there are certain triggers in Power School that, you know, we have to keep track of.
So I guess one that I'm considering what you're talking about, and I'm going in my head. The fact that we're leaving it up to building principals is one of the biggest things that we were so opposed to last week. Because if at Dingman's Middle School, they're saying that those students, like if you're leaving it up to, there has to be consistency among all secondary students.
Yep.
So to me, it's not up to the building principal. It is up to either Dr. Bell or to you as the director of secondary education to make that determination as to at what point is a student going to be marked present if they're home. And I guess, what is that threshold? So if they have strep throat and they're out for a week, are they going to, like, is that going to count? Or like, so I guess, I just don't like the ambiguity of the policy. So I think that there needs to be a very cut and dry, okay, so maybe you can't do it as on a day-to-day, but if you're going to be out, if the doctor tells you, you know, hey, you've got a really bad case of strep throat and you're out of school for a week, well then, if you're Zooming all week, that should then be, so I guess that's what I'm looking for.
You're exactly right. And that's what we're trying to do, is remove that ambiguity. So the reason we threw that in there
But
was,
I feel like you just added it back in.
Sure, but no, I'm taking the opposite of approach of the kid is marked absent excused for the day. That's what's in first period. So that's what triggers for the other 7 periods. So then that student has the ability to Zoom when they're able to throughout the day. So it has nothing to do with the building principal. The reason we threw that in was if we're able to add additional attendance codes to Power School, like for example, absent Zoom, just making that up, which would be great. Then we don't have to come to you with a policy change. That it would be directed from the building principal, but it would be myself telling the 3 principals, that's the new code, make sure your people know it.
So I then would want this to say the administration and not the building principal.
Absolutely, that's fine.
And so I think that we need to take the building principal out of it entirely, because I think that
I totally agree. Yep, that's fine.
And I guess I just want to make sure that we and I know that everybody has a lot on their plate. So, but I would like us, if possible, to be able to give that option of being able to, for that to count for those in-person brick and mortar students, so that if they are Zooming, and I realize that I completely understand that it's to their advantage to still Zoom from home, regardless of whether it's an excused absence, unexcused absence, or they're marked present. I guess I'm thrilled to hear that we're relaxing the attendance policy, because that was my biggest, you know, if after 10 days you need a doctor's note,
exactly.
Like at some point that becomes, you know, if we're asking them to stay home out of an abundance of caution, at some point bringing them to the doctors every time, you know, little Johnny has a runny nose because they've already been out for 10 days just becomes, and the parents are going to send their kids to school.
And you're right. And that's why in the attendance policy for next month, we took out any reference to just 10 absences to make sure it was clarified to 10 unexcused absences. So that would only be for absences that there is no communication that comes back to the building regarding where that student is. Otherwise, the absence is excused. And the communication from parents has been really great so far to start the year. You know, and going with that approach, the teachers will still know and encourage the kids to be on Zoom. So having them marked present, the other thing we wanted to avoid kind of from the other end of the spectrum was, if a kid is sick at home, we don't want to put more of a strain on their mental health, feeling they have an obligation to be in every single period. So if they're marked present for the day, they may feel like they have to go to everything or else they're going to get marked absent, when we want them resting and getting healthier. So by having it across the board and putting the onus on the students at the secondary level to Zoom in when they're physically able to, that would be the best option. But in a situation like we're in right now, where we have students quarantining
Right.
for a long period of time, that's what we want the additional codes for, is so that we could designate that somehow without changing their whole track in Power School, which
So
gets
are
ugly.
we able to, so let's say, you know, in next week, we come up with this code, but we don't have the code for right now. For these students in particular that are now going to be quarantining, can you retroactive change that code
Yes.
in Power School? So so then they would be marked as being there as long as they are Zooming for the day while they're quarantining, because if they have no symptoms, then there's really no reason for them that they can't be doing that.
Exactly. And that absence excused is simply saying they're not present physically in the building, not that they're not engaging in their work. And even PD in their guidance says it is a good idea to try to differentiate between that in your attendance if you can.
And that's, I guess, for me, you know, I mean, if little Johnny has a runny nose and mom writes a doctor's, writes a note and says, you know, little Johnny isn't coming to school because he has a runny nose, well, that's an absent excuse, as is the student who's putting in the work and is at home. And I guess, to me, that should also be reinforced, and I completely agree with you as far as the mental health component, that you don't want to force them to do work when they shouldn't, and they should be resting. But at the same time, I also think that, you know, they should be encouraged to do it when they can. And so
this is
I'm
just-
excited about the possibility of a different.
And I'm glad
attendance
that you
code.
understand all that, because this is just one of those situations where our policies sometimes have to catch up to the technology. We've
Right.
never had this avenue for kids to be able to participate
Sure.
in their classes
Well,
at
and
home.
we just approved this on August 20th, and we're
Exactly.
already, you know, we're
So
3 changes in.
We'll
So,
keep fine tuning it to find the best way across the board to track it.
right. So I would just take out the building principal and put administrator, whether that be whether that be you or Dr.
Superintendent or
Bell, or whoever
designee,
that's
maybe?
going to be, that it's going to be a directive from you to the building principals to allow that.
Absolutely.
So I just would like to add to the conversation on page 2 of this policy. It says students who regularly access academic instruction by way of live streaming shall be considered present for attendance purposes during those hours which they received instruction.
And they are the Zoomers.
Those are the kids that
The
are
5
tracked
days
as
a week
Zoomers.
Zoomers,
Right.
and they're coded differently in Power School.
Yes.
Okay,
So that we know who they are.
Just like the homebound section has the same line in it,
Yeah.
same idea, they're coded differently.
Whereas a kid just who's a regular in-person kid who's sick today, there's no special code for him. We're expecting him to be in school. So the regularly are the 5 day a week Zoomers. That's what that means.
so over on page 3, you're saying that someone who is ill, who only may attend some of the classes, is being designated as, what's the
Absent excused.
absent excused.
Right, an in-person kid.
But
not a-
over the 5-dayer, if they choose not to participate in, they are not getting an absent excused for any of those days or hours that they didn't participate in.
If you're a,
So-
if you're a Zoomer and you're absent, you'll be marked absent.
So I guess what, it just needs cleaned up, the wording. I'm not ready to vote on this because
If it's
they-
any consolation, we know what it means and we're the ones that have to make it happen for you.
But-
But if you're a 5 day a week in-person kid, there's no code next to your name that says you're a Zoomer. So therefore, that's why we would like to use the absent excused or something new.
And you would use absent excused
Excused, because
for
then there's no
the
penalty.
5-day Zoomer also? If
Well,
They
we,
didn't participate in every class.
If we
on
knew
the
that they
day.
weren't going to be participating, if a parent gave a note or made a phone call, yes. If the Zoomer just doesn't show up the fourth period, they're absent on next.
absent, unexcused. If we have no idea where the Zoomer is,
Correct.
then it becomes absent, unexcused.
I just would like to see the language be,
I think you gotta have a little faith in us. This is really new stuff,
well,
but we deal, you wouldn't believe, I just wrote down 1,500 kids in a high school times 7 periods. That's 10,500 times a day that we have to mark those kids as something. Unlike in elementary school where we just take their attendance once in the morning, I mean, and if you add the 2 middle schools, that's another 7,000, so 17,500. And we have a whole litany of codes that we have to use. So, and we've been doing this since 1997, or 98, when we first went electronic attendance on the secondary level. So we've got it down pat with what the procedures are of our people. We just had to update this because this is all new.
so what do you mean by the decision whether or not to provide such a live stream shall be? What decision would allow it? What decision would not allow it? What constitutes that decision? What are some examples of when you would allow the live streaming and you wouldn't, according to that?
I don't have it
If
in
a
front of me.
student or parent requests access to the live stream
How do you?
due to illness or absence, the decision whether or not to provide such a live stream shall be in the discretion of the administration, because we just, what constitutes that discretion? What are some examples of when you would say, yes, you may live stream, no, you may not?
It's actually the opposite. We're trying to allow it for everybody.
Okay, so I just feel all this language needs to be cleaned up and just made a bit more clearer to us, because as board members, our number one responsibility is policy. And I just see a little ambiguity here that confuses me, and I've been working on policy for a long time. I do trust what you're saying. I just want you to put it in writing, that I can understand it better.
You have to understand, we have to write some of this stuff, because it's a policy, not a regulation or a practice or a procedure. So it has to be, we have to become more nimble as an organization, because things are changing daily. So writing it, that's the idea of policy, is to give you some latitude to try to do these things, like find new codes in Power School because PD is recommending that, and stuff like that. So that's part of the vagueness of it.
But we have to answer to the vagueness. The first time someone says, you use this discretion with this student, but this discretion with this student. I don't know what constitutes this discretion you're talking about.
Well, the nice thing is you don't have to worry about that in the city. You're not going to have to make that decision. That'll be us. And if we're somehow inconsistent, then you could call us on the carpet.
Until someone says we're discriminating against their.
But you're not the one. I'm saying that the board doesn't make those
Well, we are approving
10,500
that.
decisions
So,
every day in the
no.
high school. Every day we have to decide what codes to put on these kids for every period of every day. We've been doing this for 20 years. If you don't vote it, then nobody from home is going to be allowed to live stream. If you don't vote yes tonight, then nobody that's home sick can live stream.
Well, I guess since we
Because it would wait a whole
adjusted
nother
to some
month.
of this language last week and it's back in it again, why weren't we communicated with? Nobody communicated last
Just vote
week.
no. Just vote no.
No, last week I asked to remove the principal, so we did that tonight. You left in administration, so we're giving you that, ability to make those decisions. But
So I think to Pam's point.
Just make the
so-
corrections that you want now.
Right, so can we take,
That's what we're
I
trying
think,
to do.
right, so
No,
I,
you said punt it to another time. I'm saying do it now. Let's get it done, because we've been kicking this around and we're trying to make it work. But you also have to give us some trust and you have to give us some latitude.
so if we take out the sentence that says, if a student or parent requests access to live stream due to an illness or absence, the decision whether or not to provide such a live stream shall be at the discretion of the building principal. If we take that whole sentence out, that paragraph, which it would say live stream video for routine illnesses and absences. A student participating in in-person learning but is absent on a given day may connect via live stream in classes where available. The student will be marked absent excused in these circumstances unless otherwise communicated by the director of secondary education. So if you take out that whole sentence, then I think we're eliminating the ambiguity. If you are an in-person student, you are allowed to access Zoom or live stream if it's available, and you are absent excused unless we find a code that would allow that person to be marked present. So
Sure.
I think if we just take that sentence out, then I think that we eliminate.
And I definitely understand. The intention of the sentence was to avoid having kids bounce back and forth, particularly with our relaxed attendance code,
Right.
which becomes extremely problematic on the teacher. So if a student misses 3 days of absences a week and they're Zooming, but they are a brick and mortar kid, it becomes very problematic for 7 teachers across the normal school day to track that. So the point of that sentence was for the administration to step in and be able to say, you have to stop playing games. If you're going to be out, then please change to be a Zoomer. If you're going to miss this much school. But if you're going to be a brick and mortar student, please don't take advantage of our policy. So that's the intent of that line. That
Right,
sounds
and I
ambiguous.
understand that, but
Sure.
can we also consider some type of policy that says, if you do this, you're going to resort back to being. Zoom
Because
or
it's
student
new, I would just caution about putting that as policy because we don't have experience of what that
Right,
looks like
and
yet.
I do agree with that, I do agree with that.
So can we put in so if we strike that first sentence and we leave the student participating, that's the green section, can you add then a sentence underneath that says, should an in-person student take advantage of the option to live stream, the ability to live stream may be revoked?
For that language?
I mean, that way we're allowing it unless you're abusing the ability to do so.
Sure. That, again, that's the intention of the way it's worded. So if you prefer that, by all means, that's the flexibility we were looking for.
Well, but I think because the student or the parent has to request access to the live stream. So I guess who are they requesting access to?
For the live stream?
Right, that's
At
what
the
the
secondary
sentence
level, it's
says.
directly to the
To the
teachers
teachers.
through Schoology.
But so the student who's home has to email the teacher.
No, they go into Schoology and there's a recurring Zoom link to join the class daily.
I guess the requesting access to me means that someone has to give you approval, that it's not just going into that student. Yes.
Okay.
So I guess that's like, to me, that means that somebody has to approve the fact that you're going to Zoom from home for the day, as opposed to just they're able to do it.
Yeah, like today we said, please start signing into Zoom tomorrow. Like that's how it's going.
Can I interject at any time?
Mhm.
All right. I don't know how this fits into what everybody else is getting, but it's not too far out of the line. Parents just call me, and the number one complaint they get is not so much with the policy, but it's in the implementation of our policies and the communications. I mean, I think sometimes we don't communicate real well, and we don't do that intentionally. It's just a matter of how things are. And right now, what I've seen since March 13th is everybody in our country, and certainly those outside of our country, are wound tighter than a piano wire. What wouldn't have bothered us on March 12th surely bothers the heck out of us easily on September 12th. So I ask people, like, just a bit of patience. This is all new to everybody, you know, and I see us getting aggravated here and we're at each other. What parents ask me, it's very simple and basic, is they'll call up and they'll say, Jack, I got a student that's in the middle school, a kid in the high school, and a kid in the elementary school. I want some uniformity because my kid in the elementary school was marked absent because it goes by that building. And the kid in the middle school wasn't marked absent because of that building. And the kid in the high school is that building. I think what we need is uniformity throughout all of our schools. Everybody's the same. You're absent for this reason. You're not absent for that reason. And we need to communicate this better because right now, parents are getting very frustrated, and they're frustrated because of the situation in the world. But like I said, everybody, including myself, my own wife, we're all wound up like a piano wire. So I think we need to try to help them because they don't know. And they're calling me because they're frustrated. And I say, well, you need to call your teacher. You need to call your principal. You need to follow the chain of command. And sometimes they can't get through to that teacher instantaneously. And we don't have the patience right now. I know my patience is a lot less today than it was on March 12th. I think everybody in the room feels that way, and everybody in YouTube land feels that way. It's nice to step back and take a breath. I just want to see uniformity in our things and then implementation that goes with the policy. But we have to have everybody on board. You know, even tonight, just an example, with the Ask DV, parents are sitting there in YouTube land tonight saying, do I email Ask DV, or do I email school board we've miscommunicated that at least the last couple of meetings I've been to. I told everybody.
It happened when you were away, because we've been doing it this way for several meetings.
I remember the last meeting that I was here 2 weeks ago, and I told everybody to send it to schoolboard.org, and I was told at this meeting, no, send it to Ask DV. Now tonight it's school board. We got to get better at communicating.
But it's been multiple meetings. Pam said she would prefer that it doesn't go through the administrator, but go directly to the board, so there'd be no filter. So we switched it multiple meetings ago.
It wasn't multiple meetings because I sat at that table 2 weeks ago. I came down at the special meeting. And I said, I Zoomed half of it from home until I got muted out, and I came down here. And I sat right at that table where Peg Schaefer is. I said, I told 12 people today to send their stuff to Ask to schoolboard.org. No, I was told, we're sending it to SDV.
No,
That was
you-
2
It
weeks
was
ago,
the
John.
opposite.
It was the other way. You
Yeah.
told, you said ask DV
Yeah.
and I said, no, Jack, we switched it a couple minutes ago. And he said, and you said, John, I'm sorry. I sent them all your way. I didn't mean to. That's what I thought. we
What
were
I'm
doing.
saying to you right now is there's a lot of parents watching this right now. They don't have an idea in the world where to send the questions to.
School
I'm
board
just
meeting-
telling you.
School board meetings.
So
for
now
anybody
they
out
all
there,
know
send it
it's
to the
school board.
Email, and then
Join the
outside
meeting.
of the school board meetings, you're gonna send it to the Ask DV email. It's pretty straightforward.
So while we're having school board meetings, we're to send it.
Yes.
The
Because that
minute
allows.
the minute we leave the live stream, those questions then go to Ask
Well, I
DV.
mean, yeah, because ultimately what happens is when you send stuff to Ask DV, that's an email that you can find on our website. That is to get information about the district. You know, so if you had questions about this, I can't find this on the website. I don't know who to call. I don't know when the yearbook money's due, et cetera. That all goes through the Ask DV website. That's a service out of that's the email address through our website as a place to go if people can't find information. Because we don't expect people to email the board. I keep telling people, listen, the board are a group of overseers who volunteer their time 2 Thursday nights a week and now, or a month rather, except for this month, it's 4. I said, they're not gonna know when the yearbook money's due. You know, that's the stuff you run through Ask DV. I don't even know when the yearbook money's due. So we call the high school and say, hey, when is the money due? So Chris Lordy can answer them. So the Ask DV goes through Chris Lordy, and that's for district information.
Can I make a recommendation? And I'm not sure
Please.
exactly how YouTube works.
Yep.
But is there a way we can, maybe Dylan, when the meeting starts, can post at the top of the discussion on there?
Yeah.
Or, and
That's a
just,
good
and then he can turn posts off, because I think he's had them off. But just have something somewhere on YouTube that when
Yep.
people go on there, it tells them where to.
That's a good idea.
Sure,
John,
we'll have
can you
looked
make a
at
note of that? And I already have 10 or 15, so I know that parents are knowing to send it to the school board at dvsd.org during this meeting, so that's good, at least, so thanks.
And I would just like to add, we set the policy and the community influence is what helps us to decide how we're setting the policy. I understand the procedure, the process that you have to put into place to make this policy work is going to be very complicated. You can come back to us and say, it's not working. We need to sit down. We can revise a policy anytime. We could revise it next week after this week.
What I'm trying to,
But we need to see, I agree, we need to see uniformity. If it's ambiguous to me, the average parent out there who has not worked on policies for years and years and years, imagine how they feel. So
John.
I just want
they feel pretty bad, Pam, and we've sat here and we've worked on policy and sometimes it gets confusing for us. So what about the person that's sitting at home? That's why I ask, whatever we do, can we please just do one thing that's uniform and then implement it according to the policy? And everybody is on the same page. And that way we can post it and tell the parents, this is it, regardless of whether your child is in Dingdale Middle School or Dingdale Primary School or Delaware Valley Elementary School or the high school. Everybody is the same.
Well,
Absent is this.
You're not going to be able to do that though, because in this case, this policy, as far as whether you're absent, excused, unexcused, whatever, only relates to secondary. Because those elementary students who are in-person students, if they are absent, they are absent. They're getting their work sent home. They're, mom and dad is, or they're sending the work home with a brother or sister, or they're getting it home the next day. Because they're not zooming into that Zoom class. Because if that Zoom class already has 25 kids, well, little Johnny who has strep throat isn't zooming into a different class for the day. So this only applies to secondary, where those teachers basically have a hybrid classroom already.
All right.
So I understand your point, and I think that in every possible scenario that we can have that continuity, I think it's important. But I think in this case, elementary is you're absent, you're absent. Like that's just, it is what it is. And we're letting up on our attendance policy to provide and allow for students not to be truant.
Right.
And you're not going to get nasty grams in the mail. No threatening with the district magistrate. But I think in this particular case, and that's why I think it's important you're right, to have at least consistency amongst our secondary schools by removing the building principal. And I think that if we just leave the sentence as the student participating is absent in a given day, they may connect and that will be absent excused. And then if we want to, if we see that people are, or if we see next month and you say, listen, people are abusing the policy, now they're turning this into hybrid, do you know what I mean? Or, they're only coming to school 2 days. I think then you can come to us next month and we can change it. But I think at least this gives those students who are in-person students the ability to Zoom, and they don't have to request permission from a building administrator to do so. They're going to have access if they're an in-person student. If they're absent, they can Zoom and they're absent excused.
Exactly. We can create consistency with it like
Right.
that. And
So I think
we agree, we need it.
Right. So take that one sentence out and it's no longer building principal and it's director of secondary ed.
So John says he needs this done tonight in order to have school tomorrow, so we gotta stay and get it.
Just did it.
We
We
gotta,
just
did it.
then that's fine.
That'll
Because-
work.
Because we gotta get
Two
something
sentences
on
will
there
work.
tonight.
Yep.
Okay,
Rosemary-
whatever it takes.
Rosemary, did you have something?
Really? Can I
Sorry.
talk? No, I'm sorry, I'm being sarcastic now. My question is, what happens to the elementary student that can't Zoom into a classroom? Okay, they're out with strep throat for a couple of days, that's one thing, but what if they're quarantined for 14? What
We're-
can we do to help those kids?
The teachers are all, that can post all the assignments to Schoology.
Okay.
And then the student can access it that way, or they could also call the school and we can print out the assignments like we did before. Like we would do anyway, we get the books together and have the assignments ready and the
Okay.
parents can come in and
Okay.
pick up the work, just
Okay.
like any other year.
Okay, so
Good job,
it would
Tom.
just all be hands-on kind of stuff. It would be send home the math book and do these pages and these, okay, gotcha.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
And one just quick clarification, somebody asked, if they're keeping their child home because of their being overly cautious, and they usually go to brick and mortar, they wouldn't get an absent excused because they would need a doctor's note if they're an elementary school child or something along those lines, correct?
Well, if the child has any sort of symptoms and the
Right.
parent's keeping them home, honestly, we wouldn't know if it's out of an overabundance of caution or if the child had the sniffles and they were being cautious to keep them home. So as long as the child was in the secondary level, they can stream in as per this policy. On the elementary level, as we just discussed, they would pick up the work.
And Corey, we would say if it's an overabundance of caution because they're not feeling great, that's one thing. But if it's an overabundance of cautious because they're concerned about the environment, then at the next benchmark, switch over to a Zoom student so that we can keep that consistency.
And how do you collect that information?
Through our school counselors, the parents or the students reach out.
So if you see an increase in students Zooming, do you reach out to them to ask why? Who initiates that information? The counselors will call and say, we've noticed that so-and-so has been out for 3 days this week.
We would still have our kind of our safe practices, even though we're not, we wouldn't necessarily have to have student attendance improvement plans, but the expectation is still that counselors are monitoring the student attendance and would be reaching out. That wouldn't
Because
be
I
any
think that would
different.
be encouraging to get that student.
And on a secondary
They knew
level,
someone
you will
is-
have teachers say to the counselor, hey, this kid's an in-person kid,
Mhm.
but he hasn't come in a week and a half.
Right.
That kind of thing, or he hasn't come in, so they'll flag, they'll flag those kids and then the counselor will follow up with them.
And we want that working parent to know that that student was home. Right? So, yeah.
Is there, especially to Rosemary's point about the elementary level, and I know that, we have the ability of printing stuff out and that's wonderful. But I mean, if you have a 14-day quarantine and you're potentially missing, 2 weeks of school, would we then, I mean, especially, some of our Zoom classes are low, would we then potentially allow that student to Zoom in for those 2 weeks? Or we're not ever going to?
That's a tough one, honestly, because of grading and all those other pieces. Now you're talking about a different teacher providing that instruction and putting the grades in. They don't have access to the grade book and all those other kind of things. I think that certainly we can have some degree of flexibility. However, at this point, that's not set up for the elementary schools.
I just think that perhaps that's something for us to work on for the future is a plan in place, because I mean, you're talking about 2 weeks of instruction that student is potentially missing out on. And sending home all the work in the world is great if you have a parent that's going to help teach that fourth grader how to do the math and the reading and stuff. But if the parents aren't able to necessarily do that, and listen, we all know that math is different now. So I worry about those students falling through the cracks.
Yeah, and just like we've done in the past, we can send work home. And if it is a situation where they didn't get much support, the teachers are going to help them when they come back. No different if they had chicken pox or mumps or measles. The only thing that we have to offer them now that we never did before was the Schoology, in that it makes it easier for them to track the work and do the work, as opposed to just picking everything up at the school at the front counter, where everything's left for Johnny, Sue, to pick up everything. And so it's better than it used to be when you had chicken pox or a broken leg or things like that, because you have Schoology, but it's pretty much the same as it was.
I wonder if, as we get further into the year, I know we don't typically do tutoring yet, but we do it, in usually like the reading and math tutoring, especially at the elementary level, comes later. If maybe we can set up some Zoom tutoring, and that may be a way for those, if a student is quarantining, to utilize that as an option. And that way, at least then it's not graded. Do you know what I mean? I think if there's some things that, and again, this isn't today or tomorrow, but in the future, kind of thinking some outside the box a little bit for those ideas might.
And the other thing too is if a kid comes back and the teacher says they're behind or they're struggling, then we get them face-to-face tutoring after school. They participate in that.
And I just wonder though, if we're offering tutoring, do you know what I mean? Listen, we may have to be offering Zoom tutoring for our students who are Zooming as well, that might be an option, for that student who's quarantining for those 2 weeks, is to utilize, Mrs. O'Malley is,
there's a million things.
Tutoring on Monday mornings, you can Zoom into that while you're home and at least get some,
There's a lot of what ifs. We don't even know what half of them are right now.
And I guess that's why I'm just saying to keep this on your radar for the future as we are coming up with some solutions. Do you know what I mean? And
we got a great staff. They're working hard. They're coming up with stuff every day. We'll keep plugging.
I was going to say, John, that our staff, if they realize a child is struggling, they're going to do everything they can to help them. And being able to communicate with the staff member, with their teacher at the elementary level, even through Schoology, they can say, I'm having a hard time with this, I'm having a hard time with that. And I'm sure that our teachers would jump in there and put in the extra time to make sure that the child was successful and not falling behind 2 weeks.
I'd rather be, and I definitely understand what Jessica's talking about here, but before we get to the tutoring and helping the child catch up, let's be proactive, like you say, and let's not let the child fall behind and fall into those cracks. So if a child is home quarantined for 14 days, there's nobody in this country that's volunteering to get COVID. It's not the child's fault, nor is it the child's fault if they have the chicken pox. That's what happens. But we have to somehow find a way to give them an equal education. I know easier said than done. I'm not saying that's easy, but again, we got to look to the future with this. This is all new to everybody, but we have to guarantee that child an equal education. And if the child is sitting home for 2 weeks without a teacher in front of them in a certain way, and the child is not showing symptoms, they're asymptomatic, they're not feeling poorly, they can certainly go in on Zoom. I know that they're in a different classroom and there'll be different teacher and grading, but we somehow got to have to figure a way to facilitate that. Having said, it's very easy for me to say that as a board director that's a volunteer here. You, the folks that have to actually do this and find the time and the work to do it. I know what I'm asking you to do. I know it's not simple. I'm just saying we have a commitment to provide, and it's a legal commitment for all of those that have taken the oath in this room of oath of office. We have a commitment and an obligation to provide an equal education to every student. And we have to try to meet that as best as we can. That's the big thing, as best as we can.
And I think, just like Rosemary said, it's no different than if they had chickenpox, measles, broke their leg. Our teachers do amazing stuff to try to help our kids.
Yeah, I know.
So I have a lot of faith in them. So I don't want to micromanage them. Right now I have a lot of faith because we've always had to deal with these issues, with the medical emergencies and those different things. And the elementary teachers how much they give. They're very caring people, but it's also easier to keep track of kids when you only have 20 or 23 kids, as opposed to carrying a load of 6 classes and 150 kids. Right. It's there. I mean, those teachers own those kids. They treat them like their own. Yeah. And so they'll do everything in their power to help them.
But John, what I'm trying to say is the child with chickenpox or the child with strep throat or the child with the flu, they have a manifestation of those sicknesses that could keep them from actually zooming into a class. They're not feeling well enough. But we're dealing with COVID-19, and in many of the cases, the children are, or the adult are asymptomatic. They're not showing anything except they are showing positive for COVID-19. And they have no restrictions in zooming into the class. So the child with chickenpox may not be able to participate, but the child that's home quarantining that hasn't gotten the test result back, that may show up negative or it may show up positive, we still need to educate those children. There's nothing, that's what separates this COVID from chickenpox or strep throat or virus. Some of these people that have COVID-19 are completely asymptomatic and they can fully participate via Zoom. Those are the ones we have to educate. We have to make sure we're educating them as best as we can. And I'm sure on Monday, we might not be able to educate them that great. What I'm saying for is progress, not perfection. We're never going to get perfection, but let's educate them better on a Friday than we did on Monday. You know, and I think everybody in DV has always shown this is what we want to do here. We want to grow.
When I brought up the tutoring, it was more to help those elementary teachers and take a little bit of the burden off of them trying to, you know, on their own time, reach out to these students, like, you know, are on their breaks, is student by offering something else for those students to help catch them up also.
Jack?
And so my point is back to Jack and Jessica, that certainly children who are at home quarantining have the ability to Zoom in. What we're saying is we're not allowing them to do that. And I think that's a big mistake. I think even though their grades might be, their tests might not be graded, but while they're at home, they should be able to, in college, we'd say audit the class. Right. We're not getting graded on it, but we're at least able to sit in the class and take in all that knowledge. Right now, sitting at home doing nothing, I think it defies the purpose of why we're here. So
they're on Schoology and they have those electronic things. It's not that they're not getting the work or doing anything like that.
But they don't have anything live while they're at home.
No.
They're not seeing a DV educator, and I want them to see
I think
a DV
they should be able to
educator.
audit the class, John. I know, not.
Well, since this is kind of outside a lot of your industries, I promise you, we will take this back to the elementary principals next week and brainstorm some ideas.
Okay.
So I just
Thank
would
you.
like
So
to.
I was just
oh,
gonna,
sorry,
so
go ahead.
that as they come back and they are now behind, we will offer them tutoring in person or Zoom
Whenever
Because-
they,
Teacher will catch them up in class.
to
Yeah.
catch them up in class. We'll
Catch them
offer
up in
them the
class.
tutoring that we normally
Yeah.
would have.
we have all those
They always
vehicles in
do that.
place for the kids that have been absent, you know, like I said, whether it was a broken leg or whatever, to help get kids caught up. And nobody knows a kid like their homeroom, their classroom teacher in elementary, because they teach them every subject. You know, they have them all day. So and I can tell you as a former classroom teacher, there's a million opportunities that you get at different times of the day to say, come here, I want you to sit over here and work on this because you missed this, you know, while they're working on something else. And there's just a million things that you would never imagine, ways to get kids caught up and get them extra help. You know, sometimes it's, you know, and hey, when you're done with your lunch, come back to the class. I want to work on a couple things with you before everybody else comes back, things of that nature, you know, and that happens all the time. It's you're just not privy to it at this level, but it happens all the time. So, but we will have a conversation at team next week with the elementary principals about what are some other things we can explore for them, you know, to try to help this since this is an unusual situation.
We could circle back next Thursday at the reopening,
Sure.
just for an update on that.
Sure, I look forward to it.
And you have the language, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I would just want to add one more aspect to the high school. I know there will always be some students, families who take advantage of a situation, but I really feel for the most part, the parents are working with us. And I'm just curious if you're seeing that, Brian, at the high school level. There may be some students flip-flopping back and forth, and we will address that somehow in the future. But I also understand that it's going to require some additional, you know, time and work on your part. So with all of the codes you discussed, so perhaps we need to hire someone to assist with that. So, you know, come back and let us know about that. You may just need an office worker who sits down and tracks all of the code information you're discussing that I'll admit I do not fully understand. So, educate us as to how it's working. And
And you have to have the rules in place for those people who might break them. That's the hard part, is that 95% of the kids, with the stuff we put in policies doesn't apply to 95% of the kids because they're good, obedient kids who follow the rules and do the right thing. But you always have to have them in place so that if they violate it, that we can do something about it.
And we're caught
Because
between-
that's the consistency that Jack talked about. If we don't have it in the rules, and now there's that inconsistency where different people may do it differently. We know that a lot of this stuff we worry about doesn't impact 95% of the kids, but it's that being ready for the other 5.
And we're caught between a rock and a hard place because we're sitting here this evening saying, if you think your child is ill, keep them at home. Don't doubt. Okay. And we have a hybrid situation where, we don't want to have anyone who's sick in our high school. So it's a really tough call to make. For me, I'm going to give, I'm going to consider the parent and student are doing the right thing.
And they will. They will. In 95% of the cases, they will.
If we're going to ask, as Pam said, if we're going to ask a parent, keep your child home. If you're not sure, keep them home. We better make sure that we're educating that child. We better make sure that that parent isn't saying, man, I really don't think my kid has COVID, so I'm going to send them in because I don't want my kid falling behind or falling through the cracks. And John and Peg and Dr. Blum, I know from me personally, everything I'm asking of you, it's a big ask. I know what your jobs are. I know how tight you are with stuff right now. I know how overwhelmed you are, how all our educators are, how all our administrators are. I know what I'm asking you. I'm not asking you to change things at 7:01 tomorrow morning. You know what I mean? I'm trying to be reasonable. John, I've suggested things to you. You've come back to me. You've been more than reasonable with me. I'm not asking you for tomorrow. So I don't want to put any more pressure on you. I'm just saying going forward. And like the homeroom teacher does know the child, but we're in week 3. And I remember in first grade, I walked into Sister Joseph Richard's first grade class, and she didn't have any idea what I was like in the first 3 weeks. Then she got the bad picture by the first or second month. Yeah, but I hid who I was for the first 3 weeks of first grade. Yeah, that was the honeymoon period. It didn't last very long. But, these kids right now, the homeroom teacher does know the child the best. It takes a while, though. Right now, we're in the 3rd week, so we got to go by what we got to go by. That's all I'm asking. And believe me, I know you're under the same pressure, if not greater than everybody else. So I'm not asking you to change this by 7:01. It's just things we have to do as soon as we possibly can.
And John, on the language on 831, you have what Jess had recited? Jess was removing that sentence?
It was just striking the first sentence out of that paragraph and just changing the building principal to director of secondary education. And then I think if we have to add in there a caveat about reneging, or preventing a student from doing it because they're abusing it, then either we can figure that sentence out tonight or we can do that next month. But I think that one sentence is just doing the opposite of.
Yeah, we'll do it now.
Well, does that need to be in the policy or can that be in the reg, switching back and forth? Because then, if it's not an option next semester, for instance, does that need to be in policy? I don't know. I'm just asking.
Well, I think the only thing is that if you think that it's going to be an issue that people are going to flip flop back and forth, then if all of a sudden we tell a student, well, you can't Zoom in today, then they may come. But the policy says that
it may be a matter of a conference.
Right.
Yeah.
We could probably do that.
I would leave it out of the policy.
Oh, okay.
Just put it in the reg.
Instead of coming up with a new sentence, he'll be okay.
Okay.
If you want, it doesn't matter. I'm okay with it.
We'll give him
And listen, it may.
Yeah.
We'll clamp down if we have to.
And if the student does come to you and say, well, the policy says that I'm supposed to be able to, and you're telling me that I can't, then we can always add something and allow them to do it until we can change the policy.
The beauty is there still is that administrative approval or whatever.
Yep.
Yes.
It's a good caveat.
We need to give you a
Well,
working.
no, because we're taking that part out is my point. So it's only going to say a student participating in-person learning is absent on a given day may connect. The student will be marked absent excused in these circumstances unless otherwise communicated by the director of secondary education. So I guess unless you're going to construe that unless otherwise communicated as you may not do it either.
Yeah, we're gonna throw the onus on that director.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you could do it both ways, that you're absent excused unless, you know, you
Right,
come back
right.
and say that we have a new code, or you
Well,
can do it
and that's all we
unless.
want, is because that'll create the consistency that
Correct.
everybody
Right.
wants.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Is everybody okay with that on the board?
Yep, thank
Good?
you.
Yep.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Really bad. I'm gonna tape it up.
All right. So after that lengthy discussion on that policy, is there any other discussion on any of the other policies that were listed?
Yes,
Please, no.
yes.
No, that was a good discussion, though. I
Yes.
appreciate it, everyone. So all those in
Hold
favor?
on.
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah. Oh, you're saying yes, yeah.
Yes, I
Okay.
have more
Yeah,
discussion.
sorry, yeah.
And hopefully it'll be quick, but policy 203 on page 3 of 4, the last paragraph just hasn't sat right with me, and maybe you can help it sit better. Because I pulled up all of the links and tried to cross-reference things, and it's just, it's still not, 203?
Immunization.
Yeah, the last paragraph, the new section says, the district may disclose information from health records to appropriate parties in connection with an emergency when necessary to protect the health or safety of the student or other individuals. In accordance with the law and the regulations and everything else. Who is an appropriate party? I can't seem to drill down to that, because everything else seems to say it's a medical professional, it's the Board of Health. This just says appropriate party.
Because it could be the Department of Health. It could be the physician that is contacting us with the communicable disease.
It could be the ambulance.
It could be the ambulance because somebody had they're having a diabetic seizure. So the EMT needs to know what the condition
But this is
of the child is.
only regarding infectious disease, isn't it? Hold on, where did I read that? Oh, no, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Could be a student with HIV that the ambulance person has, needs to know that they obviously,
We see that
I
a
mean,
lot.
it's those kind of, and it's only on a need to know basis that you would disclose that.
Yeah, and that's one thing that the law says, which the policy says a little different. And to be very honest, I'm not sure which one I like better. The policy says connected with an emergency when necessary to protect the health, safety, et cetera. And the law says in connection with an emergency, if knowledge of the information will protect the student or the community. And I kind of like that better, because it's not that we're just going to tell them because.
Right.
Do you understand where I'm going with that? And I am, you're making me think now more, I'm thinking of it in relation to a COVID-19 situation, a pandemic, an epidemic, something like that.
Right.
Because then I also want, what is an emergency? Is it an emergency that's declared by, what, in other words, if this is all about specific to disease and how that information is handled, what is an emergency?
This is PSBA on here?
This is PSBA.
Yeah, and it actually, John, most of it is right here in the,
In the law.
yeah, public school code. And I just, and then I cross-referenced it with the family educational policy rights. And I just can't. Thank you, yes. God bless you. It's just not sitting right with me. And I, like, for instance, now you have contact tracers who are, in many cases, next door neighbors who've taken an online course. And there's a lot of people who are very uncomfortable with that. And this is essentially saying, if that is one of the appropriate parties, then information about your minor student could be given to a neighbor. And it gets a little sketchy for me. And actually in the law somewhere it says, it was other individuals was used instead of appropriate party. But that just, I don't know. Am I overthinking this?
Is there anything so pressing that we can't kick?
I
it
think
to
we
the
can
next
wait
work
till
session?
next month.
Can
and
we
try
take,
to-
yeah,
try
because
to-
I'd like to
If it's
do a
not
little more.
time
Yeah, let's
sensitive.
be better safe, yeah.
Dawn, what the federal government defines that, they call that a competent and qualified person. So qualified means one who is organized, means one who by possession or of a recognized degree, certificate of professional standing, or by extensive knowledge, training, and experience, that would be your emergency personnel.
Or
A six-
appropriate party.
Successfully demonstrated his ability to solve or resolve problems related to the subject matter of the work or the protection. Under OSHA or under federal regulation, they call that the competent qualified person.
Okay,
And
but
that's-
this doesn't say competent qualified person.
No, I know it doesn't. It doesn't. But if it did, the question I hear all the time, what defines competent person? So that's basically what you're asking. It's just a different word. What defines qualified person? So I understand why you're asking that question.
Yeah.
You're
it needs
not-
more.
Why don't we pull it and we'll flush it out a little bit and bring it back in.
Put it back on
Thank
the
you very
work
much.
session agenda.
What I'm
See?
saying is when you
3
ask,
minutes, I'm
That's
done.
easy.
when you ask the question, Dawn, when you ask the question, am I wrong to ask this? I don't think you are wrong to ask that. I think it's a valid, legitimate question.
All right, so is everybody okay besides policy 203, which we'll remove and move to the October work session for discussion and subsequent approval? Good. Yeah, Jess? John, did you have anything else, or are you okay? Don, you're good? Okay. All right, with the changes of 8:31, is everybody okay? All right. No other discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing no objections, the motion carries. Please note in the minutes, the following policies are under review: 146.1 trauma-informed approach and 204 attendance.
And 203.
And now 203.
203.
Thank you, Mrs. Bouquet. Oh, no. All right, other business, first from the board. Is there anything that anybody wishes to bring up under other business?
Yes.
Yes, Mr. O'Leary.
I'm getting asked this question again. It goes back to absenteeism, only this time it's absenteeism of the educator. So when an educator is not in school for any reason, personal day, sick day, or anything else, the children that are Zooming do not get to participate in that class in the manner that they would be without. Again, they're not getting an equal education in my eye as to the child that's in class. So we need to fix this. How do we go about fixing this?
Jack, they are getting the exact same lesson. The substitute teacher is only teaching what is posted on Zoom. And the teacher, Schoology, is only teaching what is posted in Schoology, and the students at home are only getting the assignment that is listed in Schoology.
Right. And the
So there
student,
is no difference between the students, what they're learning at home, or the students that are in the classroom when a teacher is absent. It's the exact same lesson.
so what's the substitute doing in class? In class, what's the substitute doing? If I'm sitting in class and I have a
She's
substitute teacher,
They're proctoring the instruction.
they're not instructing.
They're not
You're
instructing.
basically like a proctor to make sure that everybody's behaving. Everybody's gonna go into their Schoology account, whether you're in person or Zoom. You're gonna go to the Schoology account and do what the teacher left.
Okay, so you're all working on your own,
Right.
as if you were in, say, DV Cyber for the day.
Correct.
Okay,
If they were adults, we wouldn't even need the sub. But because they're minors, we need the sub to make sure they're not jumping out the window and running the wall.
right. I understand. It's just the parents that I'm talking
And
to,
they
and
all know each other. Yeah, right. No,
certainly I'm a parent of two children that Zoom.
right.
And the other parents I talk to, and I don't think this has become an issue with my children yet. But
Right.
sooner or later, somebody's going to be out sick. And I'm going to be the parent sitting home saying, hey, how come my kid isn't learning today?
Right.
Because I was under the impression that the children in school were actually
right.
getting taught that
Yeah.
day.
In the old days, when we were all teachers, we used to have to write lesson plans out when we were going to be sick and then try to figure out how to get them to the school. And then the fax machine came, and then we figured out how we could fax them because we didn't have phones or anything. Now, what happens is when the teacher's out sick, instead of writing a lesson plan for the sub, they're writing plans for the students and posting it in Schoology.
So our substitute teachers are in fact not substitute teachers, they're proctors.
They're proctors more than anything, because now we're getting the regular teacher to upload the stuff they need up to Schoology. So
Okay,
it's
then,
another place where Schoology has allowed us to kind of put the kids at home and the kids in school on an equal footing.
okay, then I think we need to tell parents your children are not being taught by a substitute that day. Your children are being proctored by,
But the
By itself.
substitute is there to help the student if they have a problem. If they're trying to do the assignment and they have a question about the assignment, the substitute is there and will help them. The substitute isn't going to sit there at the desk and just make sure that they're not swinging from the lights.
But those Zoom
They
students
will
don't
come
have
out.
access
Okay,
to
but
They will
those-
come out
those-
and they will help the other kids. It's not like we're paying for substitutes to sit there and do nothing
However-
except. proctor.
however,
They
then
will help.
it
The
goes
Zoom-
back to my original part, then the Zoom kids are not, what if the Zoom kid is having a problem? They're not getting that help from that proctor
Sure
or
they
that
are.
educator.
No,
How?
no, they're
They
not.
can't
They're
get in.
not.
No. But they certainly can email the teacher and send a message in elementary using Dojo or a message through Schoology, and the teacher can get back to them upon the return to the class. So, and we deliberately set it up that way, because substitutes are not trained to be online instructors. And the other issue is because of FAPE and providing a free and appropriate public education, you can't have two different, exactly what you're saying, Jack. You cannot have two different standards for education for those kids. They have to have equal opportunity.
Okay.
Therefore, we are not presenting it. We're not doing anything outside what we're presenting in Schoology for the teachers when they're absent.
Okay, so Peg, your child and my child are in the same hypothetical classroom together. Your child is in the classroom, my child is Zooming. Your child has a problem that day and she uses the educator slash proctor to help. My child has to email.
Well, ideally.
Is that fair? Is that equal?
what
Is that
they-
balanced?
what
No, it's
they-
not.
What they should be doing is emailing their teacher and leaving a message for the teacher. So that the teacher can, the certified teacher in that classroom can respond when the teacher returns. Again,
Again, this is a secondary issue on the elementary level. If a teacher's absent, then there's a traditional sub who's going to lead the class because it's not a Zoom, it's a secondary issue. And quite frankly, on the higher up we go in the grades, the more difficult the content comes. And the subs will tell you, listen, I'm filling in a calc class, I'm filling in physics, I'm filling in engineering 3. They're not able to answer questions. They're like, I'm sorry, I can't answer this. You're going to have to wait and talk to your teacher tomorrow or email your teacher. So that's what happened before Zoom ever came, because there's a certain level where the content is way too rich.
We told parents that if you Zoomed, your child would get everything equal to the child that's in
Right.
school.
So-
All I'm saying is we have to hold to that commitment. I don't know how we do that. I'm not an educator. I'm just saying we have to hold our commitment because we did tell parents that if you Zoom, your child will get everything the child in school gets.
And that's exactly what when we trained our substitutes this summer, we told them their role is to proctor the classroom, that the lessons would be posted to Schoology, and that's their role.
But not for Zoomers.
The teachers are,
Nobody in front of the camera for Jack's kids.
and but however, they're not instructors. The sub is not teaching.
Nobody's teaching it anyway.
But not even the proctor.
Well, the proctor is for behavior. If you misbehave at home, that's between you and your parents. The proctor is to make sure that the kids in the room are supervised. That's all. Because of Zoom, to try to keep it on an equal footing, what Peg is saying is they train them that you're proctoring because you're there as the supervisor. No different than if an IA covered it or somebody else covered it. They're not teaching the lesson. Because we have this new tool called Schoology, the teacher has left the material, what the kids are going to do, whether they're in person or they're Zooming. The work has been left for the kids by the regular teacher.
So if a teacher quarantines for 14 days, there's going to be a proctor in that class for 14 days.
And but the teacher's going to keep putting the work up.
If the teacher is ill with her quarantine or his quarantine and can't put the work up because they're ill, we have nothing to substitute that.
Well, that's going to be a whole nother issue.
We don't have substitute teachers anymore. We have proctors. I think that's what we're getting.
One of the benefits of Schoology is in the event someone is out and sick and unable to post a lesson, as Lori and Joy talked about last week, you can copy lessons from one teacher to another that teach similar subjects, so that there would be material that could be populated into Schoology for students to work on. They have been. That's what they do.
It's a wonderful thing.
Yes,
And they'll post,
absolutely.
yeah.
On Schoology, do substitutes have access to the Schoology account or no? Not at all.
No, that was another thing, is
Okay.
that we didn't want every sub on earth that comes in to have access to that teacher Schoology account, because then that creates a whole nother liability.
And the teachers have been so extensively trained in Schoology and
Right.
still require constant coaching because it's so new.
Right.
The idea of coaching up day-to-day subs in that for a variety of
Right.
subjects would be pretty much impossible.
Something for the future. I know a lot of LMSs have the built-in chat feature, so if you could find out a way to give the substitutes access, that'll help with that synchronous question answer back and forth, down the
What
road.
about
I think if I'm applying for a job as a substitute at Delaware Valley, I think it behooves myself to go out and learn Schoology, you know? It can't be that impossible to learn because people are learning it, you know? So,
But it doesn't matter, you're not going to share that.
well, you wouldn't share that class code, but tell me again that of course you can't share the teacher's class code because that leads to confidential emails, student assessments, things like that. But certainly we can put up as different Zoom. Like if I know that Dr. Blum is not teaching AP World History today, certainly we can put up a link and get in touch with the students and say, your Zoom class for today is on this, and assign that to the substitute teacher, whoever it is that's teaching it, whoever's teaching AP World Geography or World History today. You know?
And it's a very difficult ask for a day-to-day substitute to teach AP World History in any way, shape, or form.
Well, can we put up a Zoom link for a separate account for the class every single day? Why does it have to be linked to the teacher? You
Who
know,
would it be linked to?
it could be linked to Mr. XYZ who does not exist with no confidential information. There's your Zoom link for today, just like this Zoom link is on here. Who's this Zoom link linked to? Who's this Zoom link that we're on right now? Who's it linked to?
This way the student has someone to communicate with.
Right.
That's what you.
That's exactly it.
Is
I mean, who are we linked to right now? You know? I remember Zach Pierce sitting once in the cafeteria when we were up in the cafeteria in Shaholder, and he said, who's paying for these lights right now? So I asked the same question years later.
I think
Who are
something
we
that
linked to?
we need to remember though, because this is not the elementary, this is the middle and high school. This isn't an entire day that they're with that substitute. They're with that substitute for one period. So it's not an extended period that they don't have. It's just for that one class. And, you know, how do I say this not to sound like a jerk, but you're saying that Schoology it takes learning, okay? Teachers were given an extra 2 days paid to help learn Schoology. And now we're talking about substitutes who can just come in and do it. I don't, how is that reasonable? And we're expecting them to, on their own time, learn it. It's a little disingenuous to say that, I believe. But again, it's one class. If you have two teachers out, it's two classes. It's not the whole day.
No, it's not at all similar. It's like if I go to apply for a job as a reading specialist, it would behoove me to know something about reading. If you're applying for a position now as a substitute in this world that we are now in from this day forward, it would behoove me to know something about Schoology. It would behoove me to know something about Zoom. I think that should be part of the qualification going forward. Will everybody learn Schoology by tomorrow? No, certainly we have our own people struggling with that, and we're all struggling with it. This is all something new. But again, we're talking about a new world. And I don't want to use that word, a new normal, because there's nothing normal about this. But this is the world we're faced with. And certainly everybody's going to have to learn this going forward. And if I'm going to make a career as a substitute teacher or a substitute proctor, it certainly would behoove me to know what I was going into.
Long-term subs do have access to Schoology and email accounts of the teacher. Is there the ability for our day-to-day subs to get a school email account, possibly? And then if a student who's who is Zooming from home could email the teacher?
I would think that if there's a major issue, they could certainly reach out to the counselor during the day if somebody's having difficulty with something, and then we could probably troubleshoot it in that
I mean,
way.
I'm just more
but-
thinking about, not like, and I completely understand your point, but I'm more thinking about, somebody who is out for 2 weeks. Do you know what I mean? Like, hopefully that same substitute is going to be in that class for 2 weeks, that at least they would have some communication with that person that's proctoring that class. Maybe it's not Zoom and it's not face to face, but
I think that if a teacher has to self-isolate because we're asking them to and they're not ill, I am confident that our teachers are going to be communicating with their students. If they are ill, and hopefully that doesn't happen, but if we do have teachers that are ill and so on, I think we'll try to work through coming up with some accommodation for those kinds of things. I'm very nervous about creating an expectation for substitutes to have to get up to speed on the technology and so on. As we said, we have professional educators that have worked very diligently to get to this point in the school year. Having that expectation for teachers, retired teachers that are our subs, for teachers from another walk of life that come in and substitute, I think that's a huge ask at this point. If we said, hey, we're going to run a summer learning academy next summer, if you want to come in and be a substitute and we're going to get you up to speed with these kinds of things, that might be something that we could offer. But know that our sub pool is sufficient at this point in time. But if I told them I'm going to layer on a whole lot of additional responsibilities for $110 a day, we're going to lose people.
And I'm not asking them
no,
to
I know,
do
but
anything
that
with
was part of
Schoology.
our-
I just
yeah.
thought that would be any form, I just feel like any form of any form of a way for those kids who are Zooming from home to have some sort of contact with the person that's in the class on any given day would at least allow them to feel like, listen, Miss Jones, who's who's in that class as the substitute teacher for the day, if that student writes her an email and says, hey, I can't do problem number 3, she may have no idea, but at least then she's emailing them back saying, I'm sorry, I can't help you with that. Just like she's not helping those students who are in class with number 3 either. It would just have some sort of, it would make those students feel like they had that contact.
But I do think still reaching out to their classroom teacher. If a teacher's out for a day, they'll get back to them the next day. No different than any other year of teaching. If it's something where they're out for several weeks, as long as the teacher isn't seriously ill, I'm 100% confident that our teachers are going to get back to those teachers. It really would be the isolated incidents where a teacher is really very ill and they're unable to do that. But we certainly can bring that back to the teachers in our buildings and discuss it in PLCs to see if there's a way to deal with it. But again, I really caution. I'm not so sure about how we would set up, emails
And I don't
for
know either.
everybody.
It was just a,
Yeah.
like I said, just some sort of way for that student to communicate in any capacity.
Right.
Obviously, it's going to make them feel like they're not missing out on something that those in-person students are, that they, even if they perceive that those in-person students are getting something that they're not, some sort of form of communication, I think would help alleviate
And
that.
there is a direct communication now that the students do have through Schoology. They do have a school email, so they can post questions to the classroom teacher immediately if there's a question or concern, whether live or for the next day when the teacher returns.
Okay.
So there is that the students now have a DVSD email as well. So
And
there is
I remember reading that last.
Yeah.
the end of last
And,
week.
I think the answer to my question is probably no, because I know Corey's mentioned a chat feature, but from what I'm understanding, most of the subs, or at least some of them, don't know the material for the class to be able to answer the question, but the students probably do. Is there something like that in Schoology that this, because I'm assuming that what I'm hearing is, so the student at home isn't able to see a projection. They're just seeing their Schoology, but that's what the kids in school are seeing also, except they have the sub there, who I guess if they have some knowledge in the course can answer questions. Can the students talk to one another?
There's
when they're-
discussion boards.
Yes.
I
So-
think they
They have a
can,
message
yes.
board.
Okay, so John can say, hey, anybody, can you help me with this? And they can actually then, so
According
it's,
to the teacher.
so effectively is what's happening when in secondary, when a teacher is out, the kids in the class almost become Zoom kids without the live feed.
Correct.
so you kind of got Zoom at home, Zoom in the classroom.
They're all
And-
Schoology kids. None of them are Zoom.
But they do-
They all become Schoology kids.
But it's, the message board, I think, could be
A
really,
great option.
yeah, to make sure that they.
And then of
That's a
course they
great point,
text
Dawn.
each other all the time.
Listen,
You know, they all have phones, they all text each other if they need help.
all I'm trying to say here is something very simple. If the 9 of us, the 9 board members in this room tonight, and Brian at home, if we represent the substitute pool of Delaware Valley, I can tell you, I want to be working every day. So I want to be able to differentiate myself from the other 8 board members. So I'm going to go out and learn Schoology. And I'm going to be calling Peg Schaefer up and say, Peg, I know Schoology. Peg, I know this. You should pick me over Corey Homer. You should pick me over Brian Carsa. Because I want to be there every single day of the week. I want to be working every day of the week. I don't want to be sitting home. So it behooves the substitute to learn as much as possible. Because
can
if
I
I'm
just
the
say
substitute,
something?
I want to be there saying, I'm better qualified. Pick me, pick me, pick me.
And that's an example where someone might be out for a while. If they're in a car accident, they're quarantined for 2 weeks or something like that. That's where we say, okay, who can go in there? Because this isn't just a one-shot deal. You know, we need somebody, someone's out, they're in the hospital, they're gonna be out for a month. You know, that's when you gotta go get the Jack O'Leary home. No, seriously, that's where you're gonna have, because we're gonna have to do more than just post work if the poor teacher's in the hospital. You know what I mean? So now we gotta do something more. That's a big difference than
different
just
type
the
of
daily.
And the typical.
John, you're an employer. You're an employer, John. You employ people. And if I'm in the pool, I want to be shining. So you're picking me every single day. That's what it
Right,
comes
but-
from being a 41-year union guy. You want to be picked. You want to be the guy with the qualifications that gets chosen. You don't want to be the guy home not getting paid for the day.
Yeah, but correct me if I'm wrong. Don't our subs work that there's some kind of a posting that it's
Yes,
open
yeah.
and it's the first one who
Yes, yeah,
jumps on it, who gets the day? So if we need 5 subs that day, it's the first 5. So it's not, we're not really pick, other than the long term. Long term, they're picking them. So that certainly is going to benefit them to learn Schoology there. But for a daily thing, it's really, I think we've qualified them to be in the pool, and then it's whoever, the early bird gets the worm.
I'm up at 3 a.m. every morning, putting my boots on, going ready to go to work. I want to be that long-term substitute. I want this, so that's why I'm saying
And
it
Vicky-
behooves the person to learn this.
And Vicky had a few comments. Sorry, Vicky.
That's okay. What I was going to say is the problem is not knowing Schoology. It's that it's tied to their power school. Can you hear me? I don't know. Okay. So now they're logging in. They would have to log in using the teacher's IDs, which they don't want to give out. And I certainly understand that on a day-to-day basis. I wouldn't have a teacher have done that. We do give access to school accounts for long-term subs. We do not do that for day-to-day, and I'm sure you can understand why that is. So if I'm a day-to-day sub, knowing Schoology doesn't really help me because I can't get on there because again, it's tied to this teacher's Power School account. It requires a district Google email account, and we don't just hand those out to anybody that comes into the building. As far as Jack Zooming, it's tied to. So right now they're putting a recurring virtual link in their Schoology accounts for the kids who are home to access Zoom. Without that, they would have to be able to email them a link. How are we getting that out to them? A day-to-day sub would have no way to do that. So
No, a day-to-day sub wouldn't have a way to do that. That would have to be done through the office or whoever the teacher calls into to say, I'm not coming in today. And as far as the other thing you say about, we're not going to give them the teacher's account because that'll get into personal information about the child and all kinds of stuff like that. But we can certainly give them an account that's password protected, even if we have to change that password every
I can't do that. That's what I'm trying to tell
We
you.
can certainly make a generic account and
I
let them
can't
get
make a
access.
generic account. The Schoology, the
It's
teacher,
password protected.
it doesn't work that way, is what I'm trying to say. So
How does it work then?
it's tied to the teacher's Power School account. So
Yes.
all the data that they have in there is tied to the teacher's Power School schedule and account. And it syncs that data with all of the kids' information into Schoology. So there's not a generic Schoology account that we create. I would then have to give every day-to-day sub access to district emails, which we just don't do, obviously, for security reasons for day-to-day. We do that when we know somebody's going to be in long-term, and the teacher generally will get with them and explain to them what they need them to do. That relationship has always existed before, before Zoom, before Schoology. When somebody was going to be out, they picked who they knew would be a good sub, and they arranged all of that. So
we can't make up an email account called sub@dvsd.org and password protected?
And hand it out to 100 subs
And password
on any given day. You're not talking one, you're talking every single sub who comes into the district for depending on any given day.
Sure, and they'd only get what's on sub@dvsd.org. They wouldn't be able to access the child's personal information because that's under the teacher.
It doesn't, I don't know how else to explain it, but it doesn't work. I can't do that. No.
Maybe it's something we could discuss more in depth at a reopening committee workshop.
Sure.
Not anything's gonna, come out of this discussion tonight or from this. I know that Mr. Fisher had a comment.
I think what we're looking at is another group of substitutes who are not one-day, short-term, or long-term, but an intermediate term group of teachers who will take over for people who are quarantined or out for a month. So what is the definition of long-term sub?
Well, even if it's not a definition of an LTS on a board approval of a long-term sub, if there's somebody who's using FFCRA days or using their own sick days, but we know they're going to be out for a couple of weeks, then we're going to try to put somebody different in there, right? We're not going to just use whoever goes in every day. We're going to try to find one person to be in there for the 2 weeks and then see what we can do to help facilitate it. But it may not be called a long-term sub and not be on a board packet, because that doesn't happen when someone's out on sick leave. That's when someone's on an unpaid leave. There's a long-term sub. So I didn't mean to mix the two up when I meant long-term. I meant more than just the daily sub. When we know someone's out sick, they're in the hospital, whatever, and we got to plug somebody in there. They may not be an LTS on a board packet, but we're going to do something. We're going to try to find somebody who knows the content so they could do the teaching for both. But I will tell you, it's very hard. We are having a hard time. We can't find certified teachers in any area. Remember, it used to be there were like 400 elementary teachers that applied for an elementary position. We're running around trying to find people who are elementary certified as we've been dividing up some of these classes and stuff. There's nobody out there. It's unbelievable how things have changed in a matter of a couple of years. That drought I've been talking to you guys about.
Between in-person and Zoomers, we're going to have someone for the Zoomers on an intermediate level basis.
Right. That's the goal, is to get somebody who can do it, so that we don't have to steal people out of the math lab or steal people's other period or cancel in school and steal the math teacher third period. Yeah, I mean, it varies based on if the person's out a day or two is one thing. If it's going to be significant, we got to do something else.
So in terms of expectations, I guess we have to let parents who are Zooming know this could be an issue for you as you choose to Zoom. Our day-to-day substitutes are not available, and let them know that up front.
Well,
I, like Jack, thought they would get the same as in class, and it's not.
Well,
they are getting the same.
They are getting the same right
They're
now.
both getting Schoology.
They're both getting Schoology with no live instruction. They're both doing whatever the teacher left for them. So they are getting the same.
One has this proctor who can answer questions and one doesn't.
But I doubt it. Yeah, I doubt it. If we have a gym teacher covering 7th period physics because the physics teacher had to leave for math competition or something, there's no offense, but most of my gym teacher friends aren't going to be able to help you solve the physics problem.
Are you muted, John? Just to make sure.
Shucks, that's one time I should have been muted. I love you guys, but you don't want to teach physics either.
Hey, listen, gym teachers, I drive the black Chevy pickup. Please don't knife those tires tonight. John's Belt's car is not the black Chevy pickup. Feel free.
And something we could look into, we had a parent comment on it. as the, I guess if a student doesn't know there's a sub in for that day, they sit there and wait for the Zoom link to come through. So we need to figure out like some communication channel that there's gonna be a sub that day. So whatever that looks like.
As
just-
soon as they log in, there should be an announcement. Once they get into Schoology, there should be an announcement that I'm absent today. Please follow the lesson plan posted. So it is new, but hopefully the kids will get in the sync that if that announcement comes up when they log into Schoology, that they would know.
And we do occasionally have a teacher who may have to leave immediately, and that wouldn't be posted. So we will continue to work on that.
She said in the front of the day, so maybe we could just reiterate it to the teachers to make sure they're making that announcement.
I'm just going to say this one final thing really quick about this is I hear from parents that have their child in school. And what they say to me is, Jack, it's not fair. The Zoomers are getting all the attention. And then I have the Zoom parents who say to me, Jack, it's not fair. The in-school children are getting all, and both sides really believe this. The best way to fix that is to give both sides equal attention, the best we possibly can.
And they're getting it and they just don't know it.
Right.
Well, then we better communicate it better to them.
The other thing too is there's lots of anecdotal stories of this person has this problem, that person has that problem. When you have almost 5,000 kids, there's going to be stuff like that every single day. But they're traditionally isolated incidents. They're not widespread. If you have 500 kids, now that's over 10%. Now you got a looming issue. But so you always have to keep it in mind when you hear about this didn't work or that didn't work. That's one kid out of 4,400, or 2 kids or 10 kids. So you got to keep it in perspective.
Are we still having issues with sound quality, or have we fixed that with microphones and the cameras? And
that's a teacher by teacher issue that we're working on. Some teachers, some teachers had strayed too far from the camera. Some teachers who didn't want to be filmed live, but were okay showing the smartboard, had tipped their cameras over, but then that muffled the mic. So they had to learn that, okay, even if you don't want to be on for whatever reason, I don't understand, but for whatever reason, keep your mic up and just put a Post-it over the camera so that the mic is still up and not muffled. That was one of the issues we had. Picture this being the camera and people were tipping it like this. Well, now the mic's facing the desk. So that's one of the issues we've worked on. We have a multitude of other things. We have the second screen. We also, one of our teachers at Ingman's figured out a way to not need a second screen. If your desk is too far away, there's a way you can attach something to the smartboard to give you a second set of eyes for the Zoom kit. So literally every day people are experimenting and watching YouTube videos on how to do this better, because teachers all over the country are kind of.
I just want to make sure I know we spoke about the Bluetooth microphones and stuff like that. I know they were on back order. We couldn't get any even if we wanted to. I guess I'm just curious as to if we still have some teachers, and I guess certain subjects may be more important to be clearer than others. If we think that we're pursuing those purchases, or we don't think we need them, or where we're at with all of that.
Right now, we hadn't had any luck with Bluetooth, but what we find is some people are bringing in their own Bluetooth devices because so many people have them now and have them laying around. Once they found out that you could sync it to your smartboard and everything.
Yep.
But now you'll see teachers now wearing the Bluetooth in school. In the old days, we'd say, "Hey, take that out," because we were afraid they're talking to their girlfriend or something, or their wife, depending. But literally, we've turned the world upside down. Now we're saying you got a Bluetooth, you want to use it, So it's so bizarre how we've turned everything upside down to make this work in the meantime. And then the question is, how much of it will go back and how much will never go back?
Right.
That's the other thing. So no, we didn't order them because we couldn't get our hands on anything on a bulk purchase. I'm not sure, Vicky, if the monitors came in, the second batch, we had 70. I'm not sure if the second batch came in.
We did get some. They're coming in 20s.
In batches of 20? Okay.
Yeah.
And then the cables came in, the first batch of cables that you hooked the second monitor up to, they came in. So Vicky was spreading those out to the people that needed them. So every day it's a little better, but it's not, I won't tell you it's perfect.
And I don't think that listen, I think that we're still trying to feel our way through the process and listen, there's certainly obstacles to that, like not being able to get microphones. I just want to make sure that we're still pursuing those
Yeah.
things that may make it easier.
Yeah.
And just make it clear that it's not for lack of trying, that, you know, that we haven't purchased microphones. So that, you know, if, I know that that was one of the complaints that seems to be, you know,
Yeah.
and I know it's on an individual basis. Listen, I'm more muffled than, you know, say Dawn. But I just want parents to understand that we are still pursuing these avenues, and we're not giving up hope. And as soon as we can get our hands on those things.
And it's funny, a lot of our normal vendors, CDW and a lot of these other companies that we normally get stuff from, they just don't have any inventory whatsoever. Amazon has helped Vicky. Vicky's been on Amazon, her and Roseanne.
Love Amazon.
They're just finding stuff from all over. Buy 20 here, buy 30 here, I mean, it's unbelievable what they've had to do to find stuff, because the traditional vendors have just been tapped out, because so many, you know, the whole country's in this same predicament.
And the problem is we're all paying top dollar right now because shortage, supply and demand.
Yeah.
So for everything we buy, we're paying top dollar on.
You know, there aren't a lot of superintendents around supplying them.
And John, how is the overall behavior and cooperation of the students both in school and the ones at home?
Outstanding.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
it's really,
outstanding.
that's when Peg and I did a new teacher in service 2 nights ago. That Peg asked for what's something surprising at the start of the year, and almost every teacher to a T was surprised at how great the kids have been and how adaptable they've been to this rough situation they're being put into, which is nice that everybody, and then, they step back and say, geez, if they could do it, we could do it too. And I think everybody's getting to that point and getting more comfortable with the situation we're put in.
Nice.
We have great kids, so we're really lucky. And the kids are more flexible than we are as adults. They're just more nimble. They're more tech savvy. They're figuring out stuff every day. I mean, they're figuring out stuff and teaching the teachers on how to, here's a little trick I found, So I hope they keep playing with the products and finding more ways, because sometimes the kids this is one thing that the kids excel at. It really is something.
Vicky, did you have a comment there?
No, I was gonna say elementary kids have been amazing. I said it's almost like being in the Stepford movie. You're like, wow, everybody's sitting, everybody's quiet, everybody has masks on, they're working. It's just amazing to see. Like, they are definitely kind of rolling with it. The kids are out of recess. We told them if they're together, playing football, whatever, they have to wear their mask. If they're apart, they're okay. The kids have been fine with that. Like John said, the only kind of sad thing is lunch, because they're so spread apart that it's like, they're talking to a friend, 6 feet over, and the little kindergartners are the saddest, because there's 3 little kids at one big table, So other than that, and even that, they don't seem too phased, but they have been so well behaved. I've been doing rounds again in the building, and even the teachers have said, I can't believe how good the kids are being. I give them a lot of credit. I really just think they're happy to be with their friends, however that is.
Right.
So
thank you. Not
I
only
give
to
them a
the
lot of
kids,
credit. They're doing an awesome job,
because
all of them.
They got them ready for school. They got them excited for school. They got them used to wearing their masks. They taught them the behaviors. And so thanks to the parents, because it really shows. It really does.
Rosemary? Sorry. I cut you off.
What, do we have teachers for kindergarten and 3rd grade up in Chihuahua? The extra ones that we were looking for? When are they starting, or did they start?
They've already started.
They've already started, great. And they're both in class?
Yes.
Okay.
Is there any other business from the board?
There's one other question I have. Hopefully, it's want to be a quick one. Today I met in the parking lot Kelly Adams. From what I understand, she's the BCBA that I talked about from 3 years ago. So she just met me. I'm sending her in a welder's hat and a pair of dirty jeans. I didn't want to ask her a lot of questions. She seems like a very nice woman. What's her job? What's she going to be doing? Who's going to be under her? How's this going to work in the district? This is the questions that I asked Mary Olson, 2 years ago and stuff like that, because everything I hear from the parents with special needs, the children, is the importance of this BCBA. So I learned of the importance of this. This was not something I knew of. I had to do a lot of reading to understand it. I think it's a very important job within our district. I just want to know how, and I'm very impressed by this person, Kelly Adams. And I said I'd have to say her name 50 times so I can remember it. But
Kelly is phenomenal.
Right.
She's a BCBA. She's also our educational consultant. So if you go back to Mary Olson prior to becoming an administrator, That was Mary Olson's job. So she is Mary Olson prior to Mary becoming the supervisor of special education. She has the exact same role that Mary did then. And basically it is going into classrooms with students with behavioral needs and helping to coach the staff. She also runs a whole lot of in-services for me during the summer, a lot focused on special education, but a lot just basically on behavior management in the classrooms and so on, both with instructional assistants as well as with the teachers. So she very much mimics the role that Mary had prior to coming into special education. So
This is
Okay.
her second year in this job.
because after when Cheryl moved on, then
Right. And I just want to make sure, because I know the question that I asked Mary 2 years ago was, can you get it around to all the schools? And she admitted that it's hard, one person. So will we have people working under Kelly Adams that will go under her BCBA and come back to her, because it's a lot for one person to do. Because all I hear in special education is that every year we get more children with emotional problems. And that's the big thing we need to focus on. And I explained to her, from what I've learned and from what I've been taught, early intervention is key here. And she agreed with that. But will this person, I don't want to ask her a lot of questions. I just met her. I don't want to overwhelm her, and I can do that to people at
she's a
times.
teacher, not a supervisor or administrator. So she will not have anyone that reports to her. She will be attending meetings and providing coaching to the staff on
Right.
IEP goals, FBAs, and so on. So functional behavioral analysis, I'm sorry, it's teaching them acronyms, but she'll attend student-child study team meetings and provide assistance and support. She'll be going in and doing observations in the classroom and then providing direct coaching to the teachers or the instructional assistants that are there. It is a huge job and it is a lot of work.
Yep.
But she is extremely capable. And she was our autistic support teacher when she came to us up in the Dingman-Delaware Elementary School. So
Well,
she brought that with her. She shined in that classroom and we moved her on to the ed consultant job shortly thereafter.
I had a short conversation and I was very, very impressed by just the short conversation. Is she the only BCBA that we have on staff here at TV?
Currently, yes, there are other teachers that are in training for it.
Right.
I believe there's one at Delaware Valley Elementary School that's finishing hers and one in the secondary level in the high school, but they have not yet finished their schooling.
Okay.
One's a regular ed teacher, the other one is a special educator.
All right. Thank you very much.
Yeah, just one thing. I passed out, hopefully it went around to all the board members. PSBA has an advocacy day every year. Pam and Jess have gone. It's been difficult for many of us because of our work schedules, but guess what? It's virtual this year. So even if you can't make all of it, if you look, there's some really good topics I think that are good for us to advocate on behalf of. And so the information's there for you.
Excellent.
Hope
Thank
you'll
you.
join me.
Thanks. Thank you. Okay.
Oh, yeah, during the break, I was asked to clarify when I was talking about district numbers from September 11th versus county numbers, and when numbers being COVID positive cases reported by the state. When I said district, I didn't mean within the DV school district itself. I meant within the towns in our district. So that's part of what I've been trying to do is separate out Milford, Shahola, Dingman's Ferry, Matamoros, Mill Rift numbers from the whole county, just to get a better idea. So like last week when we had 10 cases, only 2 of them were quote unquote in our district towns. So that's clarification.
Just a few questions from the public. Can the district offer training for parents and students on Schoology? So I know we brought this up a few times, potential.
Yes, if you go to the DV website, along the top, there's things like our district, leadership, academic. There's actually a tab called Parents page. And if you go to that Parents page, there's information about Power School, there's information and tips about Zooming, and then there's information about Schoology as well. And a lot of those are little clips, couple minutes of this and a couple minutes of that, but they're actually video clips that will give you information about those different things. And then you can go to their actual website, and it's just literally it's schoology.com, and on there's a whole plethora of short videos, both that would help teachers, to help parents, and to help students. So if you didn't get enough of a good thing on the website, our website, go to schoology.com, and then there's even more videos there if you want up, that way it's timing, it's training on your time. That's the beauty of the videos.
I got and then there was a comment specifically about the substitutes in the AP classes. And are we treating those differently than we do other substitutes because it's a small subpool? I know that's a tough one, and we've kind of circled the wagons on that, but it's a good point. 14 days of quarantine out of an AP Gov class and nobody teaching it.
Teachers can identify favorite subs, for lack of a better way of putting it, somebody that's good, that does come in and teach, that can handle the class and so on. And so the teachers can put into our frontline system preferred subs, and those individuals see the openings first before it goes live to the rest of the district. So in that way, they might put in 2 or 3 people that are better versed to teach the content area and bring that in. And if that's the case, and they're going to be out for a longer period of time, as we had talked earlier when Jack was talking about bringing somebody in, hopefully we can get them up to speed to provide instruction in those classes. But again, some of those are the higher level and more difficult to handle. So I would just caution that people make the presumption that we're going to be able to do that for AP Physics or AP Calculus BC. That probably is not going to be able to happen. So, but we will do our best to try to get people up to speed.
We haven't done any, do K through 12 usually do anything like visiting, teachers from other districts? Nothing like that. Yeah, nothing. No, might be in there. All right. Last one is a negative test required to readmit a student who was previously quarantined back to the district?
It is not. They have to follow the 14 days and be symptom free according to our chart. And if there's any questions, there is a very beautiful, colorful chart that's posted at the bottom of the district webpage that parents can go and read through that if there's any questions. And certainly reach out to the school nurses. They can also help to guide you.
Excellent. All right. Any other comments from anybody? If not, the meeting schedule is as follows for. We have a work session for the purpose of discussing the school reopening next week at 6 p.m. And then several other work sessions every week on Thursday at 6 p.m. throughout October. And our next official work session on general matters is 7 p.m. October 8th here at the administration offices and on Zoom, with the regular board meeting to follow on August 15th, 2020. With that being said, may I have a motion to adjourn the meeting, please? Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing no objections, the motion carries. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.